I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026. I ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, please introduce your officials when it comes to your turn. My name is Jackie Lovely. I'm the MLA for the Camrose constituency and chair of this committee. We'll begin to my right with Miles McDougall.
Miles McDougall, MLA, Calgary Fish Creek.
Ron Weeb, MLA, Grand Prairie Wapiti.
Good morning, everyone. Brandon Lunty, MLA for Leduc Beaumont.
Good morning, Jennifer Johnson, Lacombe Pinoka.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA Calgary East.
Great. Mike Ellis, Deputy Premier and Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. I have with me my Deputy Minister, Rayanne Lajeunesse. I have Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services, Brad Smith, here, just off to my left. I have Curtis Zablocki here to my immediate right, Assistant Deputy Minister of Public Security Division. And of course, to my far right here, I have Stephen Lacroix. He's the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister and Managing Director of Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Thank you.
Good morning, David Shepherd, MLA for Edmonton City Centre, Shadow Minister for Public Safety and Emergency Services.
Good morning, Nicole Goring, MLA for Edmonton Castle Downs, also the Deputy Chair of this committee. Welcome, Minister. Sir, nice to see you.
Irfan Sadir, MLA Calgary Buller-Muko.
Good morning, Janet Aramenko, MLA for Calgary Currie.
We do not have anyone online, is that right? No remote participation? No? Okay, good stuff. Well, I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. Shepherd for Member Batten, Mr. Weeb for Mrs. Petrovic, Honourable Mr. Sabir for Mr. Haji. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Assembly TV. The audio and visual streams and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honourable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in legislative policy committees. Suborder 59.016 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies of the hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table for each segment of the meeting. Blocks of speaking time may be combined, but only if the minister and members agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the main estimate schedule, and the committees will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please email or message the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I'll call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break today? We shall have a break. Ministry officials who are present may, at the direction of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to the questions raised during the main estimate should be tabled by the minister in the Assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both the questions and the answers without interruption during estimates. So members, please, debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when the speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would like to pause for a moment. We have a new member who has joined us. Please introduce yourself.
Surinder Brar, MLA from Calgary Northeast.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to invite Minister to please proceed. You have 10 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. As already introduced, I am the Deputy Premier, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis. I've introduced my folks, of course, from the department that are at the table. But I also have in the gallery that we're joined by Ross Nairn, Assistant Deputy Minister of Strategy, Support, Integrated Initiatives, Fiona Lavoie, Assistant Deputy Minister of Correctional Services, and Joe Satilny, Assistant Deputy Minister of Alberta Emergency Management Agency. So thank you again for having me. The safety and security, of course, of Albertans is fundamental to the province's prosperity, and I've been living and breathing public safety for a long time now. When I was a member of the Calgary Police Service, I enforced the laws at the community level, and I learned firsthand how to make a difference in people's lives. Now, as the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, of course, it's my honor and privilege to enact policies that empower frontline personnel to carry out their duties more effectively to keep Albertans safe. Budget 2025 shows Alberta's government is following through on many of its commitments to enhance the province's policing model and increase public confidence and trust in law enforcement, augment and support law enforcement in Alberta, ensuring that they can respond quickly to calls for service, and provide enhanced training, planning, and emergency management support to communities right across the province. Public safety and emergency services total budget is $1.35 billion. That's an increase of $71 million from budget 2024, the highest it's ever been, showing the government's commitment to keeping Albertans safe and communities safe while ensuring our province is prepared for and resilient to the impacts of disasters. In many communities, crime and what's been done to address it are always, of course, top of mind. And with an allocation of $827 million in 25-26, the Department's Public Security Division is making sure law enforcement agencies have the tools that they need. Now, we all know that officer presence matters, and we are honoring our pledge to continue funding the 100 new officers added in Calgary and Edmonton, with $19.5 million between both cities. We're also empowering Indigenous communities to keep their people safe. With $13.9 million over 3 years, we will help build new police buildings for 3 different Indigenous police services, serving a total of 7 different First Nations. The new and expanding buildings will allow the police services for the Blood Tribe, Tsuut'ina Nation, and 5 different First Nations surrounding the Lesser Slave Lake area to continue growing with their communities. Our budget also includes $380.5 million for the Provincial Police Service Agreement, which supports the RCMP detachments right across the province. This is an increase of close to $3.8 million, and we're also absorbing some costs for small rural municipalities this year, helping them to avoid a minimum of a 39% increase on their bill from the RCMP services. Now, we're reviewing the police funding model. Because we want to ensure that everyone is getting value for their money. When someone calls 911, as I've said before, I expect that someone in uniform show up to that call, and this has unfortunately not always been happening. And that's why that we have been adding law enforcement capacity to augment and support local police right throughout this province. For example, in 2025-26, the total budget for the Alberta Sheriffs will be about $156 million. That's an increase of $19 million. A key portion of this budget is for the new Interdiction Patrol Team, which was established to secure the Alberta-U.S. border. And in 2025-26, we're spending a total of close to $29 million, which includes close to $19 million in operating costs and $10 million in capital costs. This shows Alberta's national leadership in responding to border security issues, such as the illegal movement of drugs, people, and firearms in both directions, and how that we are working to improve international relations. 4 other new teams of sheriffs are helping police disrupt crime in rural areas by gathering intelligence and evidence and by apprehending wanted fugitives. Last year, we also expanded the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods teams in Edmonton and Calgary and created 2 new teams in Red Deer and Lethbridge. This year's budget is supporting all our new and expanded sheriff teams with an additional $600,000 for vehicle leases, fuel, maintenance, as well as ammunition, body armor, and training. As first announced with the introduction of the Public Safety Statutes Amendment Act 2024, we're considering creating a new independent agency, police service, to assume the police-like duties performed by the Alberta Sheriffs. And this new agency would, of course, operate independently from the government, be subject to Civilian Oversight Board, and support the RCMP, Municipal Police Services, First Nations Police Services. And Budget 2025 includes $6 million in 2025-26 to support the implementation team and the initial leadership and planning capacity. There are many complex challenges that, of course, all of our communities are facing right now. And as I've said time and time again, to address these challenges, there must be a paradigm shift in Alberta's approach to policing. No longer will police be seen as an arm of the state, but rather an extension and reflection of the community that they serve. To achieve this, we're working to create a policy environment that strengthens the ties between police and the people that they serve. This starts with ensuring that Albertans trust their police and have faith in the work that they do. And that's why we're establishing the Police Review Commission. We're allocating close to $16 million in 2025-26 to get the new commission up and running and end the practice of police investigating complaints against police. And this will put Alberta in the forefront of police oversight, not just in Canada, but throughout North America. The implementation of body-worn cameras is also part of our paradigm shift to reinstall public trust. Budget 2025 provides more than $13 million in 2025-26 to support the rollout of body-worn cameras for the Alberta Sheriffs and police services right across the province. Body-worn cameras will document the actions of law enforcement and the public supporting transparency and accountability. And while we're all working hard to prevent crime and apprehend those who break the law, keeping inmates in custody and rehabilitating them is equally as important. Budget 25 provides a total budget of $354 million for the Correctional Services Division. This funding supports staff in Alberta's correctional facilities and allowing them to assess and supervise offenders while in custody. And to support inmates, giving them hope in changing their behaviors and attitudes and preparing them for life after being incarcerated. Budget 2025 will also allow us to continue moving forward with a modern ankle bracelet electronic monitoring program, which will provide 24/7 supervision of high-risk and repeat offenders. And we're allocating a total of $5.7 million to this program for 2025-26. We're also increasing funding for the Custody Operations Branch and the Correctional Program and Services Branch by a combined total of about $1.5 million in 25-26. This funding will support 21 new correctional peace officers who will transport and accompany inmates when they require medical attention outside of the facility. And these additional positions will enhance our ability to respond to unplanned medical emergencies, increasing safety for staff and inmates alike. The funding will also support the recruitment of 3 new staff members for disciplinary hearings and ensuring that matters continue to be adjudicated fairly and effectively when an inmate breaks the rules in a correctional facility. Budget 2025 gives us the resources that we need to plan ahead and meet the province's public safety challenges, and that includes responding to disasters. Alberta Emergency Management Agency budget will be $118 million in 2025-26, allowing the province to support enhanced emergency management training and planning for communities across the province. And the agency's base budget is increasing by more than $3 million. This includes a total of $1 million in permanent grant funding for important emergency management programs, such as the All Hazards Incident Management Teams, Canada Task Force 2, the Wildland Urban Interface Program. And before now, funding for these specific programs was provided on an ad hoc basis rather than being built in long-term budgets. By providing stable and predictable funding, we're making certain that we have the necessary resources to protect Albertans from disasters. In 2025-26, we'll also spend $2.3 million on the Alberta First Responders Radio Communications System. This will allow us to improve coverage and preserve base station towers, antennas, radios, ensuring the first responders can work together and communicate seamlessly. Beyond the supply votes reflected in the estimates, the Alberta Emergency Management Agency will also receive an estimated $7 million in additional funding from the Emergency 911 levy. And with a budget of $1.35 billion, we're keeping our promises too. Cracking down on the borders to root out firearms and drug trafficking, support the new fugitive apprehension, investigative, and support neighborhoods teams, launch the Police Review Commission and the body-worn cameras, and supervise high-risk offenders and ankle bracelets. We're also working to reduce crime by preparing inmates to live better lives as they return to society. I see I have a few moments left, and I want to say thank you for this opportunity.
Perfectly timed, Minister, right down to this last second. So thank you so much. We'll now begin with the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 60 minutes, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. Honorable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Member, do you prefer blocked or shared time?
Well, Madam Chair, it's my intent to hopefully have a respectful conversation this morning. I think it's an issue that's very important to Albertans. I have a lot of respect for the minister. I know he knows his file well. In previous years, he's been willing to share time. I know many of his colleagues have this year as well. So it's my hope that the minister will give me the opportunity to demonstrate my goodwill in sharing time in our first blocks this morning.
Thank you, Member. Minister?
Despite what the member might think, I hope he doesn't think this way. I actually like him, and I'm happy to share a respectful conversation with him. Thank you.
That's great. All right, well, let's proceed then.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be able to begin on that excellent note, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Chair, let's not, I guess, elevate things too early. Well, certainly if you care to run for Speaker, I would certainly think you'd be more than capable. Excellent. Well, through you, Madam Chair, to the minister, I do appreciate this opportunity to sit down and talk with him about an issue that is very important to Albertans. And I'd like to begin by talking about where he began. We're talking about Alberta sheriffs. So I know that in line 2.1 of the budget, we do have the dollars that are committed to all aspects of supporting Alberta sheriffs. And looking at outcome 1, we have them in the business plan referring to advancing initiatives that support contemporary and responsive policing focused on the best interests of Alberta's diverse populations. So in order to sort of better understand how these dollars are being allocated and how that objective is going to be achieved, I just have a few baseline questions I'd like to start with the minister. To begin, can the minister tell us how many individuals are currently employed by the government of Alberta as Alberta sheriffs?
That's a great question. I'll have to ask one of my staff here. So I'm looking at you, Curtis. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have the number?
Well, we don't have an exact number.
Do you have a dollar amount at least?
We have a dollar amount.
An approximation would be acceptable as well. I'm sure we must have some ballpark figure.
Deputy tells me, member, about 1,400, approximately.
1,400. Thank you to the minister through you, Madam Chair. So then, as part of that, following on that, better understand key objective 1.2, page 137 of the business plan, which refers to addressing serious and organized crime through strategies including focused work on border security, rural crime, drug trafficking, hate-motivated crime, and firearms violence. Just to better understand how those approximately 1,400 sheriffs are allocated, through you to the minister and his staff, can they identify how many of these sheriffs are assigned to each of the following areas? Investigation services, that being the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods Unit and the Sheriff's Investigative Support Unit, to Court Security and Prisoner Transport, to Protection and Communications Services, to Highway Patrol, to Fish and Wildlife Enforcement, to the Rural Alberta Provincial Integrated Defense Response, that being RAPID, to the Fugitive Apprehension Sheriff's Support Team, or FAST, and to the new Sheriff's Interdiction Patrol Team.
Great. I know my folks here are going to get those numbers for you as they're looking feverishly for them. But let me just talk in certainly the very high level. Of course, we are doing what we can to augment and support the police services right throughout this province. Of course, the primary function of the Alberta Sheriffs was court and prisoner security and prisoner transport. As we've seen them evolve, obviously they've been doing highway patrol. Remember, as you've mentioned, there is a section within the Alberta Sheriffs that do the fish and wildlife. Those are the officers that were part of the RAPID, that were supporting the RCMP. Is that correct, Curtis? Is that right? It was right. And then of course, as members heard this before, there's over 80,000 outstanding warrants in the province of Alberta. So we, of course, have units that are dedicated for fugitive apprehension. The SCAN teams, as you heard me mention in my notes, are throughout the province. I cannot tell you the amount of communities that would like the opportunity to have SCAN teams in the province. So we're rapidly doing the best to get as many SCAN teams associated. As far as the breakdown of those numbers, I'm sure my folks would be happy to get the breakdown for you. But on a very high level, this is how we're kind of distributing them throughout the province.
Madam Chair, thank you to the minister through you. So it looks like those staff are still working on those numbers. Perhaps while they're working on that, I'll move to a different question, then we can come back to some other numbers while the staff are working to find those first set. Looking at line 2.1 in the budget, objective 1.2 in the business plan, as well as the minister's frequent references to Alberta's sheriffs taking on more police-like functions, business plan, page 135. How much in line 2.1, then, where we are looking at Alberta sheriffs, is targeted to training sheriffs to take on these expanded functions?
Well, I mean, so just remember that those sheriffs at this time are still peace officers. And I certainly don't want to get into a law class regarding, unless you want me to, regarding the distinction between peace officer and police officers. But again, as a peace officer and then the director of law enforcement, who's Mr. Zablocki here off to my right, peace officers have everything from a parking attendant all the way to what you might see as a sheriff who's doing the fugitive apprehension or highway patrol. So these are functions that they are performing, trying to make sure that they're augmenting and supporting all municipalities throughout the province. It is very when you go specifically about their training, the only thing I would say is that there's about on a very high level, about a 10 to 15% difference between those highly trained peace officers that you see that are part of the fugitive apprehension, the SCAN teams, the EPU, the sheriffs, the highway patrol, and then that who is a fully trained and qualified police officer. So again, as we continue to ask these sheriffs to augment and support police services all throughout the province, to ask them to do police-like functions, this is why there's a certain section, and just for the members' awareness, if I'm just going off of memory here, I think of that 1,400, there's been about 600, is that correct? Right? Correct. Approximately 600 of those 1,400 that have been identified as people who would be next in line to transition to police officers, although, as the member has already noted, there will be a training portion to get those folks up to being fully qualified police officers.
Madam Chair, thank you to the minister for that explanation. I do look forward to a breakdown on the amount that is set aside for that training. I'm sure there must be a figure and some projection for what that would take. So I appreciate that identification as well. We've got about 600 of the 1,400 that have been identified as next in line. So my assumption then through you, Madam Chair, would be that those individuals have not received that additional training yet. They've been identified as eligible for it. So what I'm looking for is the number of what we expect the cost of that training would be. And it would be helpful as well, just looking at that in line 2.1, to provide some context. How much in the forecast total of spending for the previous year was spent on training of that type for the individuals who have already made that transition? So the minister identified that there are some high-level officers who had that, where he said were within 10 to 15% of being able to act as full police officers. If there was training completed in the last year, how much was spent on how many officers, so we can get a better understanding of how to understand how to put in context the amount that's projected to be spent on training for the next year. I will leave it there if the minister or staff might have that number or any of the previous numbers ready. If not, we can move to some other questions and circle back.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that, again, the only thing regarding the new Alberta Independent Police Service that is in the budget is the $6 million that is been set aside for the essentially the new chief and the executive chief, the executive officers, in order to start to get and establish, we'll call it the executive foundation of the Independent Police Service. Regarding those other specific officers that have taken on those police-like functions. I mean, these are things that have been going on for, quite frankly, several years. SCAN has been around, I think, ever since I was a police officer, to be honest with you. Fugitive apprehension has only occurred over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, to get you the specifics as to what is in the budget regarding their training. I'm sure Curtis can get back to you on that. But the reality is that, the Highway Patrol, again, this goes back to a different level of training but there's court and prisoner security. This is a bit of a, which sets folks off in a little bit of confusion. The court and prisoner security, as well as prisoner transport, is the basic level of training for a sheriff and in that peace officer status. The additional functions, which again, many of which have been going on for many years in this province, are just, we'll call it additional files, additional departments that are within the Alberta Sheriffs. But as far as the specific training for those folks, sure, I'm sure we can commit to getting you that number.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, to the minister through you. So just to clarify, are we close to having those numbers now? Or I see there's a bit less flipping of paper in that. Do the staff have any of the numbers that have been requested at this point?
Training, but
Well, maybe we'll ask Ross Nairn who's got something, to you come to a mic and maybe provide some of that breakdown for the member. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Ross Nairn, Assistant Deputy Minister of Strategy Support and Integrated Initiatives. The Sheriff's Branch consists of approximately 1,200 peace officers, and it's broken down into court and transport services, so the prisoner transport and court security, that's approximately 420 FTEs. Protection and community services, that's about 223. The Sheriff Highway Patrol would be about 279. Fish and Wildlife Services, 164, and Operational Support Services, 64. Head Office would be the Chief Sheriff and his staff, approximately 9. And that doesn't include the 51 FTEs that are in Budget 2025 for the Border Interdiction Team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the gentleman that spoke. I apologize. I missed the position there. I don't mean to be disrespectful. So that's a number of the things that I asked. I was looking also for the breakdown then on the number of sheriffs that are assigned to Rapid, to FAST, currently on the new Interdiction Patrol team, and then to SCAN and SISU.
Madam Chair, I don't have the breakdown. Rapid is a program that Curtis can, ADM Curtis Zablocki can go into a bit more detail.
I can add a little bit more information. Curtis Zablocki, ADM and Public Security Division. So RAPID is a program across the province where our sheriffs are trained in additional police-like functions, like the ability to respond to domestic disputes, to back up the police of jurisdiction on serious crime calls, those types of things. So it is not specific numbers. It's broad across the Sheriff Highway Patrol and the Fish and Wildlife branch of the ministry. And again, it's utilized to support the police of jurisdiction, primarily in rural Alberta, where most of that support is necessary.
So thank you very much. So what, if you don't mind me supplementing this, so thank you, Curtis. So RAPID is a program. It was started a number of years ago, I think when you were the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, quite frankly. And again, it's meant to augment and support. So all of our Fish and Wildlife would be part of that particular team. And then I think, as you indicated, all the folks within Highway Patrol would also be a part of that team. Again, it's about being a first responder, as you've heard me say before. We don't, when somebody calls 911, if they're the closest to the call, then they're there. But make no mistake, the police of jurisdiction will be the primary on any particular call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, Mr. Zablocki, and the other staff for providing some clarity on that. So just one further question then. So is that also the case then for FAST? Is that also treated then as a program where, for lack of a better term, sheriffs simply flow through as needed? Or is there a specific set of sheriffs that are assigned to that program?
So, thank you. Oh, sorry. We're good? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so FAST, I've been told, have 24 members, and there's a north and south team. Their objective is to go after folks that, of course, either have outstanding warrants or become we'll call it a high risk to the community for various reasons. And they coordinate and work with all the police of jurisdiction, everything from Edmonton Police Service all the way up north to Calgary Police Service, and of course RCMP and any other local police service to tackle that. And of course, I think you're aware, member, of course, our interdiction patrol teams, 51 members part of that team are going to be part of that team. I think we have about 20 that have been deployed so far. Is that correct, Curtis?
30.
Oh, 30 have been deployed so far. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Thank you to the Minister, through you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. For the staff's work to rapidly find those numbers and provide those. It's very helpful. Thank you. And I would look forward then to the other set of questions I had then around the training and budgets and those numbers, and we can follow up on those once the staff have those ready. I will move on to my second portion then regarding, so we've established then some of the numbers around Alberta sheriffs. Through you to the Minister and his staff, how many vacancies do we currently have for sheriffs in each of these divisions? For whatever reason, such as individuals being on leave of any type or due to the need to release an individual to fill a particular, or for someone leaving, for a different position. In the past year, how many new positions were created for sheriffs? And in the past year, how many new sheriffs were hired? And to provide some context, in comparing this year's estimate in line 2.1 with the amounts budgeted and forecast to be spent for total for the previous year, if we could get a sense of how many sheriffs left their positions in the previous year, whether by retirement, termination, or leaving to take another position. I understand those may be numbers the staff may need a moment to find. If that's the case, I have some other things I can ask while they're taking a look at that.
They can try and find some of those numbers for you. And sorry, member, I think you were referring to 2.1? Is that what you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So I have some notes here. There's 80 vacancies have been filled, not with internal, to in 24-25. What the ADM has told me is that they're sitting at about a 10% vacancy rate, though. Is that correct, Curtis? Correct. So 10% vacancy rate. So that is a number I would say is, comparatively speaking, to many police jurisdictions throughout the province, with the exception of Lethbridge, which I'm told by not just the mayor but also the chief down there that they actually are flush with officers, which is fantastic to hear. But when you talk about Calgary, Edmonton, when you talk about some of the other, the RCMP, as you've heard me say before, remember anywhere from 17 to 20% on any given day. So the sheriffs, very fortunately, are sitting at roughly about 10%. Of course, why people join and why people leave, of course, to each their own decision.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, I appreciate the rapid finding of those facts. And thank you to the staff who are providing those to the Minister. Just to clarify, so that 10% vacancy rate, I know, Minister, you frequently speak of the vacancy rate with the RCMP. My understanding is that vacancy rate is not just empty positions, but officers that may be on leave for various reasons. Can you just clarify whether we're comparing apples to apples here? Your 10% vacancy rate for Alberta sheriffs, is that just positions that are not filled at all? Or does that also include all sheriffs that may be on leave at this time?
It's just, it's the total.
It's approximate number.
10% is an approximate number. So, no, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, and that would be
Well, it's the same
approximate
with
for
the-
all
same-
sheriffs that are also on leave and empty positions?
But it's same with the
Inclusive?
RCMP. It's an approximate number, as you heard me say before, it's 17 to 20%. You see similar numbers in the Calgary Police Service. You see numbers similar in the Edmonton Police Service. Again, the only exception, and again, I give credit to the city of Lethbridge, and I give credit to the chief in Lethbridge, is that they're flush with officers. So, you know, I see the argument you're trying to make, which is that everything is low all over, Alberta, or maybe to say in Canada, but that's not entirely true. Again, Lethbridge is sitting at 0%, and again, we're in the Alberta Sheriff sitting at roughly 10%, according to Curtis Zablocki. So, look, we're trying to do the paradigm shift here in Alberta. I don't care what the uniform is. It is an admirable profession. We want people to join. And in fact, we're seeing some of these changes right now in Edmonton, quite frankly, as we see calls to service going up in Edmonton while crime severity indexes are going down. So that's good. That means that there's an increase in public trust. And that is what we want to see throughout this province, no matter where you live.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister, and I would absolutely agree. And I'm not making any particular argument here. I'm just simply wanting to ensure that we are comparing apples to apples in the numbers that we have. And I'll take the minister's assurance that in fact we are. So again, just in question then regarding the questions regarding the amounts being spent on training in our forecast for this year versus last year, are those numbers that we have, or is that something we will be waiting for later in the discussion?
Still stand by.
Stand by. Thank you.
Somebody's
Madam Chair.
watching this intently, trying to get you these numbers.
I understand, and I will express my thanks through you, Madam Chair, to that individual in their offices. They frantically shift through their papers. It's appreciated. Just speaking then about Fish and Wildlife Sheriff, so I appreciate the identification that they are specifically some of the officers that are operating then as part of the RAPID program. Now, I do know they're also a very important part of protecting our environment in Albertans, and it does take years of specialized training and expertise in order to be able to properly handle human-wildlife conflicts. But we also know those sheriffs are now, as the minister has identified, being asked to respond to a much wider range of offenses, including things like impaired driving. So I know that my colleague in Banff Kananaskis and some others have asked me just to clarify what percentage of the Fish and Wildlife officers' time is now being diverted to non-wildlife duties. And in what way is the ministry then ensuring that when we do have these dangerous wildlife situations arise, that the officers who do have the specialized training are still available to respond to those?
Well, I mean, that sounds like an operational question. I'm not sure if there's a line item budget here, but let me try and answer this for you. I would just say it's minimal. When you're a police officer and you're just doing your job and you come across somebody who hypothetically might be impaired, then obviously those Fish and Wildlife, no different than our folks here in Highway Patrol, have the tools and toolbox that are able to address it. Part of that program was to alleviate pressure off of the RCMP and quite frankly any police of jurisdiction. So really, again, this is all about augmenting and supporting and trying to make sure that, and I'm sure the member would totally agree with me, we don't want to see an impaired driver get away for some technical reason. And I can tell you as somebody who was a certified breath tech for the province of Alberta, time is of the essence in an impaired driving. Once you stop that individual, you do not have 2, 3 hours, 4 hours to wait by the time that you do the initial testing and get that person in front of what's known as the instrument, which is an intoxilizer.
Thank you to the minister, Madam Chair, through you. And I will take what he said then. He said the impact is minimal. Let's move on then. Let's discuss the Border Patrol. So looking at page 137 in the business plan, in 2025 to 26, $28.6 million allocated to the new sheriff's interdiction patrol team. So I'll just note that last year's estimates, the ADM spoke of a plan to create some of these interdiction teams to begin operating during this fiscal year or the previous fiscal year with planned funding of approximately $2.9 million, so about a tenth of what's now budgeted for this year. So I guess my first question to the minister is, can you help quantify what changed in the last year to require such a significant increase in the investment and the specific costs that have increased, that bring us to this new total of investment of $28.6 million?
I'm not sure this is being broadcast on the American Broadcasting Corporations, but it was President Trump. Let's be clear. This border security was put into my mandate letter. Obviously, it was something that I recognized and of course discussed with the Premier about. Our concerns, not just here in Alberta, but I would hopefully make the argument for some of my friends right across Canada, is that despite what President Trump has indicated, what we're seeing is illegal drugs, illegal human trafficking, and of course illegal guns that are coming across the border from the United States into Canada. The other thing that I've been very public about, and I'm not, is again, I respect my friend and member opposite, although we may disagree on some other policies. I was not going to allow the decriminalization policy of British Columbia to continue to allow drugs and especially the so-called safe supply drugs that in fact was recently caught in a bust just in the Medicine Hat area. I think it was about 800 and some odd pills that were caught, hydromorphone, to continue to allow these drugs to flow from British Columbia into Alberta. That being said, because of what President Trump had said, we had to pivot, and we had already done the pre-planning. So what we're talking about, the interdiction patrol teams, to make sure that they are trained, to make sure that they're commercial vehicle trained, and for the member and everybody else's awareness, commercial vehicles tend to be the primary mode of transportation for whether we're talking about the illegal drugs, the illegal guns, or the human trafficking. So, for example, when you go down to the Coutts border, you will see very clearly a weigh station there that has remarkable technology that does a bit of an analysis on these commercial vehicles to determine whether or not there are any secret spaces or anything that's mechanically wrong with the vehicle. And of course, we have had successes. Now, I'm going to talk about that for just one moment here. And as do we have a fentanyl issue? Yes, we have an organized crime issue in Canada, and both of those answers, both answers to that is yes. However, we are doing and working very collaboratively with our counterparts across Canada to address both organized crime and the fentanyl issue. What I have said very publicly as well is I would also like our friends in the United States to address their border concerns as well. What we have seen over the last year in 2024 is a number that has been provided me close to the RCMP, which is close to 1 ton. I wish I was exaggerating, when people say a ton, but we're talking about a ton of anywhere from cocaine to crystal meth that has been flowing across the border from the United States into Canada. Most of our illegal guns are flowing from the United States into Canada, and unfortunately, the human trafficking component of that as well. And just to give you a little bit of an update here, since January 20th, there's been an enormous amount of success in including the intervention and stopping a woman that was trying to be trafficked from the United States, from Canada into the United States. And just for reference, and I think it's very important for this committee, and as I said at a press conference, we don't necessarily see we'll call it an immigration issue with people crossing the border from Canada into the United States, despite what the Americans have said very publicly. What we have seen is people trying to walk across the border from Canada, from United States into Canada. And I can tell you that the collaboration between the CBSA, the National RCMP, and of course our Alberta sheriffs have been exceptional. And I can say, as I've said very publicly, I can say that our border, 298-kilometer border across Montana, is secure.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to the minister through you. And following on some of the pieces that he gave us there about the amounts that are coming across the border, of course, given the objective of spending this $28.6 million, the U.S. president aside, is to actually combat illegal smuggling of drugs, firearms, and people across the U.S. border. The minister gave us a couple of examples there, but perhaps he can help us understand the metrics he's going to use to gauge the success of this program more holistically. To that end, can you tell us the amount of drugs that have been seized so far, moving from Alberta into the U.S. and separately from the U.S. into Alberta? So we've had the mention of the 1 ton. If you can quantify any other amounts that have been seized so far since the introduction of these interdiction teams. Given its particular significance in the current trade discussions with the U.S. president, how much of what was seized was fentanyl? And by what percentage or other metrics is the minister hoping that this new interdiction team will reduce this flow in each direction? Similarly, how many firearms and how many individuals were intercepted during attempts to smuggle them in each respective direction? And what metrics will the minister be using to gauge and judge the interdiction team's success in reducing those amounts? I understand it may take a moment for the staff to get some of those numbers, but if the minister has a comment.
Yeah, so just remember that 110 I referred to was numbers that were provided by the national RCMP referring to 2024. So this was a collaborative effort between the national RCMP, the DEA, and typically our Alberta law enforcement response teams, our ALERT, as of course we all know it, are intimately involved in that. Since the inclusion of the interdiction patrol teams, as I told you, there was the one since January 20th. There was the one intervention regarding a young lady that was attempted to be trafficked across the border. There have been, I think, 35 impaired driving calls that they've been able to intercede with. There were 4 people that attempted to cross the border that they intervened from the United States into Canada. And then there have been some drug seizures, but they have been small amounts, if I'm not mistaken. So more of those. So I got to learn how to read handwriting again. To be honest with you, you guys.
Over 3,500 contacts, Mr.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, over 30. So since January 20th, there have been over 3,500 contacts. So that's just obviously that's. A contact with an individual is, for various reasons, and of course that has led to a number of these interventions, to these arrests, and obviously people that have been crossing the border. But I will say that the CBSA, the National RCMP, as well as our Alberta Sheriffs, and of course ADM Zablocki, all together meet fairly regularly to make sure that the needs are being met by the province of Alberta in securing that border.
Thank you to the minister through you, Madam Chair. So just to clarify, at this point, has the minister set any specific metrics that to determine what would be considered success? I mean, again, we are spending just about $30 million. We're buying a fair bit of capital equipment. We're making a fairly big commitment here. So I appreciate 3,500 contacts, fairly broad in general. We've seen a few small things, and I recognize, again, we are early in it, so I don't think it's fair to judge necessarily by what we've seen, but just to understand what metrics specifically is the minister going to be looking at to determine whether this nearly $30 million has been well spent?
I mean, I'd appreciate that we had to pivot really quickly in responding to the threat of tariffs by the United States. One of the things that we tried to do is take it off the table for the Americans, which I have said on Canadian national programs as well as to the Americans themselves, is that I do not want the American administration to use fentanyl as an excuse, or border security as an excuse. They may have some other issues that are, we'll say, economic related, but this is why I'll go back to what I was saying, that our border is indeed secure. When you talk about metrics, well, you know what? I think I said this at a press conference as well. We put this in place we are going to assess, and then we're going to even, reassess. We talk about the 3,500 contacts, but let me go back to, even when I had the first pill press bill in Canada, and I thank the members opposite as a private member for allowing me to do that. But I think if I recall, what I said at that particular time is that if we save one life, which is, then it's worth it. But I would argue the same thing here. The fact that we stopped one woman from being trafficked across the border, I'm not going to put a price on that. That $30 million, as far as I'm concerned, is money well spent. And if we can continue to intervene and stop more people from being trafficked across the border, from whether it be the United States into Canada or Canada to the United States, or stop these drugs from flowing into Alberta and saving lives, then I consider that money well spent. But again, we're going to have to continue to monitor the success of this. And again, a lot of this has to do with the threat of the tariffs and border security. I think border security is important, which is why we recognize this. But if we have to decrease our level of presence regarding the Alberta sheriffs, we may do that, or we may have to increase that, but we're going to have to continue to assess the situation as it unfolds.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister. And I would just observe there are many areas where I think that kind of reasoning, the spending for the reason of prevention, I think there's a lot more there are many lives we could save if we were making investments in housing and frontline family medicine, many other areas where the government has been much more reluctant than spending $30 million here, but I will leave that as an aside. Further on the border interdiction team, just want to clarify a few other pieces here and how these dollars are being spent. So the sheriffs that have been in place now, so that has risen to 30 from, I believe we were at about 20 in early March. We're now up to 30. Were these sheriffs new hires or existing employees that transferred from other positions to work on this new team? And if so, have additional sheriffs been hired at this time to fill those vacated positions? And what is the projected timeline then to recruit the remaining members needed to reach the full intended complement of 51?
I'll just be very brief. These were existing members, but ADM Zablocki is going to talk in detail to answer your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Exactly as the minister articulated, these are existing members being redeployed currently from other functions, but there are hiring processes underway to fully establish the IPT on a more substantive or permanent basis in the border area. It's also important to note that it's not just the Canada-USA border at play here. We have concerns around the interprovincial borders and controlled drugs and substances contraband coming from other jurisdictions through Alberta. For example, British Columbia, there's significant intelligence to suggest that quantities of controlled drugs and substances come from the port areas in British Columbia and are distributed elsewhere in Canada, obviously coming through Alberta at certain times as well. So in addition to a focus on the Canada-USA border, there'll be a focus on interprovincial transport routes as well. More specific to your question, the training for new recruits, hiring is underway to fill supervisory manager positions with the new IPT, recruit classes, advertisements for new sheriffs have gone out. Recruit classes are scheduled for later this spring, and it's anticipated, the goal is to have the IPT more permanently staffed late summer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Zablocki for that additional information. I have some questions now around police governance. These are related to lines 2.4, 2.5 in the budget, law enforcement oversight, contract policing, and policing oversight. So I know last week at Alberta Municipalities, we had a policing plenary, and I thank the minister for taking the time to speak with municipal officials there. I know they've had many questions. Councillor Diane Winches from Red Deer City Council asked the minister at that time about whether the provincial government is providing remuneration for his appointments to their policing committees. So At that time, the minister was unable to provide the answer, but did say he would look into it. I was wondering if he or his staff have had that chance, and if would like to ask if there are any amounts in this budget then in any of these line items that would be going towards remunerating ministers' appointments to police commissions or committees across the province.
So, thank you, and I'd like to thank that counselor. ADM Zablocki has informed me that the team is still working on it. As you know, we're having to coordinate with, what was it, well over 300 municipalities right across the province of Alberta. So obviously, this is a huge undertaking. The comments that were, of course, made by the councillor, we take very seriously. We do know that some of these municipalities, as we know, are there's big cities, there's mid-sized cities, and then we have very small villages and thereof, and any sort of additional cost may impact them. So Curtis Zablocki's team has agreed to take that way and continue to assess, but that's really the best answer I can give you right now, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to the minister through you. But just to clarify then, so is the minister saying at this point he does not know whether he is paying any of his appointments that have been made to police commissions? Just to clarify.
There's no decision that has been made regarding that.
I see. Thank you for that clarification, Minister. It's an item that's under consideration, but which you have not decided yet. Thank you. That's helpful. Further to that then, so second in line with key objective 1.1, strengthening partnership with police services, municipalities, and Indigenous communities to implement strategies to address crime and social disorder. How many appointments has the minister made to local policing committees and commissions so far?
Nothing to committees yet.
Nothing to committees yet.
Committees? How many to commissions then, through you, Madam Chair?
So why don't you just, Curtis Zablocki to answer that, and then.
Sure, I can make a comment. I know the minister's office is in the process of ministerial appointments to the Provincial Police Advisory Board. So that's for communities that are populations of 5,000 or less, right? The municipal boards, so 5 to 15,000 populations and 15,000 and above populations, the minister's office needs to wait for the municipalities to make their municipal appointments and then determine if and how many provincial appointments will be allocated to those committees.
And through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Zablocki, in terms of those that are existing then, and we do have several existing police commissions that were in process already, to those, how many appointments has the minister made?
ADM Ross Nairn's going to have to get back to you on those exact numbers.
Okay, thank you. Additional question to that then, Minister, I know in many occasions I've heard you use the phrase, no longer will police be seen as an arm of the state, but rather an extension and reflection of the community that they serve. But to be honest, I've had many conversations with both municipal leaders, with folks with the AAPG and others, and there are some concerns. They're unclear about how the process is being used to choose the appointees that the minister is making. There is some concerns about the lack of an open public process that would ensure representation from their communities, as opposed to what could be interpreted, or depending on your view, perhaps misinterpreted, as political intervention, representing more of an arm of the state. So just a few questions on that point. Can the minister share how many of the appointments that have been made through his office have made use of an open competition or public application to select the individuals that have been appointed? And can the minister clarify what criteria he uses to maintain consistency and objectivity in choosing the individuals he appoints? Does he have a specific rubric? Is there an outline of some kind? Does he make a regular practice of consulting with municipal officials or requesting recommendations before he makes his appointments?
Is there a specific budget line item you want to refer to?
I referred, Minister, to the business plan. Again, key objective 1.1, strengthening partnership with police services, municipalities, and Indigenous communities to implement strategies.
Okay, not entirely sure that's within the the scope, but let me do my best to try and answer that question. Certainly, we try to meet the needs of all municipalities in the province of Alberta. Is there a specific rubrics? No. I will tell you that for me, when any name comes before me that is submitted by a community member, or sometimes comes for various ways. My condition is that a person, of course, loves their community, and of course supports law enforcement. Because ultimately, as a police commission member, your job is to support the law enforcement community, making sure that they have the necessary budget in order to protect and serve the community.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the minister. There was another question there that was not answered. Just put the full question forward again. Of the individuals that had been appointed, I recognize we are waiting for that specific number. How many of those individuals were appointed by making use of an open competition or public application? I recognize we may need to wait for the staff to be able to provide a specific number, but can the minister recall any instance where he has made use of an open competition or public application?
So, going back to your previous question, I apologize. Apparently, there is a rubrics that we use. The department and the Premier's office, there's a very much a vetting process that goes through the department. I think it's a two-stage, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember now. Two-stage vetting process, and of course, the Premier's office as well has something that goes through a vetting process as well. Hope that helps answer your first question. Sorry, what was your second question?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the minister, the first question before the other question, but the other question outstanding was just how many of the appointments that have been made so far to the current police commissions in the province were done using a public application or open competition process?
I would say that many of these positions, when they become available, are something that is sort of how do I describe this? It's they kind of come up and they require it to be filled. I'm not entirely sure that there is an open process where we throw it out to anyone, we'll say, to apply. Certainly, there are community leaders within, a town or city, or even when we talk about the RCMP police governance, we try to reach out to community leaders, local elected officials, and try to figure out, who is somebody who would take a keen interest in making sure that they are representing their not just representing their community, but making sure that they're supporting the law enforcement within their police of jurisdiction.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to the minister through you. On a similar topic, again, looking at lines 2.4, 2.5 in the budget, where we're talking about law enforcement oversight, contract policing oversight, and again, referring to key objective 1.1, strengthening that partnership with police services, municipalities, and Indigenous communities. Are there any objective criteria the minister uses to determine when he will add additional members to a local police commission or committee? Are there specific metrics that he considers in determining whether to intervene in a local community? I believe under the Police Act, it indicates something to the effect of when he feels it is necessary in order to support local policing priorities, something along those lines. Are there any objective criteria, specific metrics he uses to determine when that is the case?
Yeah, it's proportional. So ADM Zablocki has indicated it's proportional. It's a 1-to-3 ratio. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, a 1-to-3 ratio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to the minister, that is the only time he will add additional members to a commission, when it is not at a ratio of 1-to-3?
There's, sorry, go back to your original question.
The original question, through you, Madam Chair, to the minister, again, noting that the Police Act allows the minister to add additional members to a committee at his choice, like a committee or a commission, up to a certain amount. And yes, respecting that it cannot be more than 49% of that. I'm just asking if, when he uses that additional power that's been granted to him by the legislation that was passed by his government, does he use any objective criteria to determine when that he feels that is necessary for a particular community? Are there specific metrics that he uses to determine when that particular community has that need?
Look, I know for which community you are referring to, but I will say this. There is a complaint that has gone in, a very serious complaint that has gone in that we, of course, take very seriously. I would say that hence why there's an investigation that is about to or I think that is about to take place, that has been sparked. For me, it has always been about public trust. I do not care what the uniform is. When somebody needs help, I want to ensure that law enforcement is showing up to those calls. And we have seen the positive results in Edmonton specifically, the community for which you are referencing. So we have seen the calls to service go up, but we have seen the calls to go up, but we've seen the crime severity go down. I've been told by the mayor that ridership is going up, and I'm also told that people are feeling safe on the trains. But we cannot continue to allow a city and a police service and a police commission that appear, according to the complaint that I am getting, to not get along. So if it requires me to appoint somebody, which is, of course, well within the law of the Police Act for me to do, in order to provide some stability to a police commission in a city that for frankly, as an Edmonton representative, I think you know how dangerous Edmonton was even a very, very short time ago, to provide some stability to help improve the public trust within the city of Edmonton, then if you're talking about a rationale as to why I would make that decision, would be why, because it is on behalf of the people of Edmonton that I would make that decision to provide stability, to make sure that that the citizens of Edmonton are safe. That is all I care about. The people of Edmonton are safe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister for that clarification. Just going to back up a little bit, just come back to some of the discussion we were having then around the border interdiction teams and some of the spending that's taking place there. So within that 28.6 million, I know we had a little bit of a breakdown there. Let's see here. $19 million of that was for operating, 10 million for capital costs. So that is a helpful breakdown. Of that 10 million then, how much of that is for the 10 weather-resistant drones? Are those all being purchased, all being purchased new? Did the department have any of these previously? And do we have an approximate cost on what those will be? How much of that 10 million would those account for?
ADM Zablocki can answer that.
Madam Chair, I can provide some information on that. Curtis Zablocki, Public Security Division. In the context of the equipment for the integrated patrol teams and specific to drones, those processes are underway to identify the make models and such. The RFP processes are underway to acquire much of that equipment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Zablocki. Are the 4 patrol dogs already in place? Are those going to be newly acquired, or would they be transferred from other areas of Alberta Sheriffs? And do we have a sense of what the spending might be, I guess, for their acquisition and training?
Well, I'll just say that they're newly required. I think everybody in the room would be fully aware that there aren't just fully trained dogs just sitting there waiting to be, you get them as a puppy and then you have to train them, and it takes a bit of time. We're obviously working collaboratively with the CBSA, again, the National RCMP, and then we've also been able to get some assistance from our corrections who do have fully trained drug dogs that provide some supports as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister and his staff. So in terms of this spending, we also know that in terms of the border issues, and the Minister did speak a bit about the concerns about commercial traffic, and I had noted that he had commented previously that a lot of the illegal stuff that's coming through is indeed coming through using commercial vehicles. The Premier recently declared the government's intent to build 3 new vehicle inspection stations as part of increasing the highway monitoring for this sort of suspicious activity. Through you to the Minister and his staff, is that included in this $28.6 million or any of the capital here, or is that would that be something that's being taken on by transportation or another department?
I'm disappointed. I feel like you didn't watch my press conference. Yeah, it would be transportation.
Thank you, Minister. On that note, then, in the interim, so it will take some time for those 3 new inspection stations to be built, and if a lot of this illegal stuff is coming through in this means, what steps will you be taking in the interim to try to curtail some of this flow?
You want to answer? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Madam Chair, Curtis Zablocki, ADM Public Security Division. Our motor transport, our commercial vehicle inspectors are part of the deployment to the border area. So they have an ongoing presence and at the current weigh stations and inspection sites, but they also have mobile capability to move through the area and conduct commercial vehicle inspections through the I'll say the border area with the United States.
Excellent. Thank you through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister and his staff. So in this budget, we have allocated $15.7 million for the Police Review Commission, as noted on page 137 of the business plan, but we do not have any specific performance metrics for that initiative. So I'm just wondering if the Minister or his staff can provide any information on what particular data they're going to be tracking in to measure whether the Commission improves outcomes. So will we be looking at things like wait times, how long it takes for an investigation of a complaint to take place, or do we have a sense of kind of what we will be looking at to see how this, to ensure this new approach is going to work more efficiently than what we have currently operating within the individual services, recognizing, of course, the cost savings that there may be, and of course, the improvement in ethics and transparency. I'm just curious if there are any other metrics that are going to be involved.
That's a great question, and the answer to pretty much all of that is yes. Really, the wait times, especially for some of these professional standards in police services, I think it was determined are just, lack of a better term, are just way too long. So we are, again, this is meant to be thorough, comprehensive. To your point, it is meant to be transparent. We're trying to make sure that the wait times not only go down for just police complaints, but we also want to make sure that wait times go down for ACERT as well. I think that's vitally important. I don't know if the Deputy Minister wants to supplement it a little bit. Or?
Sure, thank you for that question, Madam Chair. So we currently track file intake and closure rates of ACERT, and police agencies do the same for their complaint processes. So as we stand up to commission heading towards December 2025, we will be looking at all that data, and the goal will certainly be to improve on those numbers.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. See, we have about 3 minutes left in this block, so I won't get into anything too complicated at this point. But perhaps I'll just ask a question quickly around emergency management. So Page 183 demonstrates disaster recovery funding has dropped from $36 million to $15 million, though in recent years we have seen increasing disaster frequency. So just wondering if we could get some information. That's about a 58% reduction in funding. I was wondering if we could get a bit of a sense of what the reasoning was behind that decision.
I'm going to pass this to ADM Lacroix. It's his area of expertise.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I would qualify the diminishing resources as a bit of misleading, because it is money that is not appropriated in the base funding of the agency. It is money that we draw from the contingency fund against disasters that have occurred. So if we're getting less money, it means that something not as bad has not occurred in that current year. So if you look at 23 over 24, you would realize that the disaster recovery programs that were stood up in 23 were larger than the ones in 24, thus the difference in funding between those 2 years. And hopefully this year I draw zero from the contingency fund, because nothing major has happened in terms of natural disasters in our beautiful province. Thank you.
So Curtis, great, and with your military background. So I would just say this to everybody: it's a critical incident dependent and situational dependent. Is that right? Right. So as long as we have less disasters, God, I got to knock on wood here, then that number is going to go down. Right. Right.
And if I may add, actually, Madam Chair, sorry. Also affecting that number are the funds that, once those programs are closed, and if they're disaster financial assistance arrangements eligible, without getting too geeky there, that's the program that we pull from the federal government. Federal monies also flow into the provincial coffers that also offset those numbers. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Well, at this point, we've got about 30 seconds left, so not much time, I think, to get in any further questions. What I'll say at this point is I appreciate the conversation we've been able to have so far. I will say thank you to both the minister and his staff for their accommodation. I will say thank you again to whomever is there in the background working on getting those numbers for the training dollars. I look forward to those coming perhaps further in the conversation, and I offer them my apologies for making them do that additional work this morning. But I am looking forward to some continued conversation, the opportunity to dig into some other issues later as we proceed through this estimates. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's our time. We'll now move over to the Government Caucus for 20 minutes of questions from the members. Would you like to combine your time with the minister today?
I'd like to share my time if you're okay with that.
Of course.
All right, so we will now move to 20 minutes from the Government Caucus, and the minister, please proceed. The block share time is 20 minutes, during which time, well, you've decided that it's going to go back and forth in a cordial way. So please proceed.
Thank you, and good morning. Through you to the chair, I'd just like to thank the ministry for their great efforts and what they're doing, and especially in rural Alberta right now. I know that being from Livingston-McLeod, it's a vast area, and a lot of the work that you've done has been noted and well received. So first and foremost, thank you for your team. And that leads me into my first question, which is about community safety. And I know this is on the mind for so many Albertans right now, is this community safety. And I believe your ministry also believes, that Albertans deserve to feel safe in their communities. And indeed, the communities depend on it as well. Budget 2025 recognizes this with outcome 1 on page number 137 of the business plan, which reads very straightforwardly that Albertans are safe and secure, and healthy communities rely on strong social, cultural, and economic connections, and residents need to feel safe in order to have these interactions and put roots down. I have two questions in regards to this topic. My first is, looking at page 70 of the fiscal plan, this budget commits $8 million for better police staffing in Edmonton and Calgary as part of the Safe Streets Action Plan. Would the minister explain what impacts this investment is expected to have in these cities?
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. I think you've heard me say many times before, officer presence matters. Certainly is a commitment that we made to the people of Edmonton and the people of Calgary to make sure that that we increase officer presence. We, of course, are always trying to think outside of the box. The soft on crime policies that the federal government has imposed upon Canada, as no secret, has been quite unsuccessful and detrimental to the people of Canada, which is why you saw violent repeat criminal offenders being released into the communities. Doesn't matter if we're talking about big urban centers or we're talking about rural Alberta. I think, as some of you may have heard me say this before, the RCMP have confirmed that we have over 4,000 organized crime groups just in the country. That should be a concern. That should be, and we're not talking about minor organized crime groups. We're talking about serious cartels that have set up shop. And of course, with the lack of accountability or even the possibility of even going to jail when you're committing very serious offenses, you're seeing a lot of these bad people start to take advantage of this system, and hence why you're seeing people feeling unsafe. Now, I did talk earlier about in the Edmonton area that they're starting to yield some positive results, but those positive results are because of the 50 new police officers in Edmonton, the 50 in Calgary. We're augmenting and supporting rural Alberta through our sheriffs. Again, we want to let people who commit crime in this province know that if you are going to commit crime, you are going to be arrested. If the system chooses to let you out, we're going to arrest you again up until the point you stop committing crime or you leave this province.
Well, thank you for that answer. And if I can just ask one more question, just to maybe dive into it a little bit further. What metrics will the ministry be using to evaluate the results of increased policing resources through budget 2025?
I think we're starting to see this, right? So I think, as I previously mentioned, you know, the mayor in Edmonton has indicated that ridership has gone up. Okay, so that's great. So that means where people were scared to use the trains in Edmonton, they're now willing to use the trains in Edmonton, so they're feeling safer. That's a metric that we can use, right? We're starting to see the crime severity index within Edmonton start to go down. We're starting to see calls for service going up. Now, just to let everybody know, that's actually a good thing, because that means that the public has confidence in the police again to say, hey, I have a problem, or I'm seeing something that's not right, and I'm trusting you to go deal with that problem. So those are the type of metrics that we're using. So we're starting to see increased public confidence. We're starting to see the crime severity index going down. We're starting to get, obviously, the ridership in Edmonton going up, but we're, more importantly, we're starting to hear from the people of Edmonton saying, you know what, I'm feeling safer walking down the street. I'm feeling safer using transit.
Wonderful. Thank you again for that. Moving on, I just wanted to chat a little bit about border security, which we know is a hot topic right now, not only in Alberta, but across our country. On page 81 of the fiscal plan, we see public security operating expense has increased by $44 million from the last fiscal year, largely due to efforts to bolster security at the Alberta-US border. This is a topic that has made lots of news lately and has been incredibly relevant to Albertans, particularly for those who live in the southern part of our province. And as we know, my riding is one of those areas. We border down in Waterton. So looking at the specifics, page 137 of the business plan notes that $28.6 million will be allocated to the sheriff's interdiction patrol team. My first question is, I'd like to focus on some details in a minute, but to start off, could the minister speak broadly to why this increased funding is warranted and how it will make our province safer?
Well, thank you very much, and yeah, of course noted. Thank you for everything that you do. You do represent a border community, and you know, I will say that having been down at Coutts, I know Coutts is not necessarily in your riding, but of course, you know, it does parallel your riding. Look, we initially had to respond due to the serious threat of terrorists, not just here in Alberta, but right across Canada. Although it does appear at times that the administration of the United States seems to have this moving goalpost and moving target, we are certainly doing our best to take their initial complaint extremely seriously. And I say we, I don't mean us as a province, but I mean us as a country. And the concern the Americans have were regards to fentanyl. These were not unwarranted concerns. As I stated, there's over 4,000 organized crime groups. They wouldn't be setting up shop here if it was not profitable. This is why they're setting up shop here. So again, it goes back to the soft on crime policies. They just do not work. The CBSA, for everybody's awareness, CBSA deals with the entry points, and the national RCMP deal with the points, the space in between those two entry points. Now, I will say this, as I have stated before, the RCMP, have had difficulties meeting their authorized strength levels, and although they had a presence at the border, I would say that presence previously at the border was not necessarily a strong presence at the border. And there was a flow of traffic. There was a flow of traffic, again, through the commercial vehicles, but there was also a flow of traffic that was being walked across of traffic, meaning drugs, that was being walked across the border. And we also have our concerns at the ports, in both in British Columbia as well as on the East Coast. As the CBSA union has stated, that less than 1%, not 1%, less than 1% of those crates are even being checked. Those containers are actually being checked at the border. That is a concern. So, and the RCMP have confirmed that we have become a net exporter of fentanyl. It's not something that I have made up. The RCMP have confirmed this. So we are tackling this from a multitude of different angles. For your constituency and constituents, we can say, working with CBSA and National RCMP, who have added more members, working with our sheriffs, that we can say that our border is secure. We can also say that we are tackling the organized crime, making sure that Alert is working with the National RCMP, working with American policing agencies to tackle the organized crime agency or organized crime component within not just Alberta, but again, always say throughout Canada. And then we also make sure that we're working with our municipalities throughout the province to tackle this from a social and civil disorder. And I have to thank not just Mayor Sohi, but Mayor Gondik, as well as all of the mid-size mayors who took a Team Canada approach in understanding to have their peace officer programs work collaboratively with the police of jurisdictions in order to tackle a very, very complex problem. But border security is something that we take very seriously. It is not unwarranted that we have a concern regarding fentanyl, but rest assured that the importance of spending that amount of money to ensure that not only we're protecting Albertans, protecting Canadians, but also trying to make sure that we let the Americans know that we take it seriously so that we do not have this 25% tariff. And I don't want them to use that as the excuse as to why they impose that upon Canadians or Albertans.
Well, wonderful. You've answered actually a couple of my questions. One that I wanted to dive in a little bit further and through you to the chair is, would the minister be kind enough to talk about specific measures that these teams will implement to interject with these illegal activities, including surveillance, intelligent gathering, and even their enforcement actions?
So, thank you. So the interdiction, illegal so the illegal activities. Yeah, so look, this is, again, anytime we're dealing with drug dealers, I have to say that, it's the police that abide by the rules, and it's the organized crime groups that appear to have no rules. So, our interdiction patrol teams are working very closely with the police of jurisdiction, whether it be the RCMP, and especially in the south, with our Medicine Hat or Lethbridge as an example. We do have our safe communities and neighborhood teams as well that are doing some remarkable work down there in the southern region as well. I can tell you, sort of just off the top of my head here, I know that we had one one bus that was from Alert. Actually, I think it was in the Medicine Hat region. Don't know if the intent was for them to cross the border or if their intent was to go further east. But, you know, I will say that a large quantity of money was seized. Certainly there was a lot of drugs that were seized, and I think it was anything from crystal meth. I think there was some fentanyl seized there as well. But the biggest one that really caught my attention was the fact that there was hydromorphone that was seized, well over 800 pills of hydromorphone. And as many of you know, hydromorphone is the so-called safe supply drug that is handed out freely on the streets of Vancouver. You know, I have said for quite some time that these drugs were being diverted, although I did have assurances from the provincial government in British Columbia that it was minimal to not being diverted. And as I have stated before, typically for drug dealers, they tend to redistribute those hydromorphone pills and target young people. And I mean our kids in junior highs, high schools, and of course the post-secondaries. So that to me is a huge concern. Look, when we talk about, I know everybody likes to talk about metrics, but really it really is about keeping people safe, getting the drugs off the street, and trying to make sure that we have a community where people feel safe. And I know in the southern Alberta region, when we were asked at Coots there, you know, some concerns even just regarding safety and quite frankly people walking across the border from the U.S. into Canada, there was times where people, I would say, were not necessarily feeling safe and also feeling feeling the impact of people walking across the border. So I appreciate the question. I hope I answered part of it, but these are really tough questions to get answers on. Yeah.
No, well, I thank you for these answers, and I just have one last question for you, just because I understand that this is a sizable investment, and it's no small undertaking. What kind of training and technology will be provided for these patrol teams, including specialized equipment, tactical training, and legal authorities?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, thank you for watching the press conference. Member opposite, I'm not sure watched my press conference, but that's another story. Just bugging. Anyway, sorry, we've got to have some fun in this, right? Look, 51 uniformed officers. Look, this is, you know, why was that determined? Well, I asked the experts to my right, to be honest with you, whether it be the Director of Law Enforcement working collaboratively with the sheriffs as to specifically why the uniformed officers. Obviously, you have to trust your staff and the folks within the department and their expertise. And of course, their recommendations were make sure that, especially when you're talking about border security and the concerns regarding organized crime, we have to make sure that they have all the correct tools in the toolbox, which is why those officers are equipped with the carbine rifles. Of course, they have to have the support staff. 10 support staff is all police. You know, we have civilians that are able to help officers out, whether it be dispatch or doing analytical work, which I think is hugely important. Intel is, you know, I hate to get into policing terminology, but Intel drives the tactics that we use in policing. The 4 drug dogs, as previously mentioned by my friend in the opposition, are hugely important when it comes to sniffing out the drugs. But again, that's something that we're hoping to have out there sooner rather than later. Again, we're collaboratively working with the CBSA and the National RCMP in utilizing and collaboratively using their resources on this as well. And of course, the 10 cold weather surveillance drones. You know, we do have some drones in that we've been able to demonstrate within Fish and Wildlife, and those officers have been down to show us that. I can just say that the technology, the infrared, being able to again work with the CBSA and work with the National RCMP to have that infrared to pick out you know, any sort of heat that might be emanating off of a body, I think is something that is only helpful when we talk about illegal crossings in either directions. And of course, the 4 narcotics analyzers to test for the illicit drugs, right? It's not like what you see in the movies. You don't just dip your finger into it and put it to your mouth. That's not what you do. They have they have these analyzers, and they're hugely important. I think it always helps with the investigation, whether or not you're going to lay the charge, or how you're going to deal with that person from a law enforcement perspective. So that helps.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Minister. And if you're okay, I'd like to cede my time over to Member Lunty. I believe he has a very pressing question he'd like answered.
Yeah, well, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, first and foremost, have these dogs received their names, and are you still accepting applications? I got some good ideas. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you.
The budget is that?
Yeah, it's,
That's for you.
anyone watching on TV could maybe fill me in a little on that. So, Minister, I would like to turn to a very serious matter, and that, of course, is Indigenous policing. So, we know that social disorder and organized crime are significant concerns for Albertans all across the province. I would note in the Ministry's business plan, Outcome 1, to keep Albertans safe. Under Key Objective 1.1, we mentioned strengthening partnerships among police services, municipalities, and Indigenous communities. So I would like to dig in a little more about Indigenous policing and how Budget 2025 is working to strengthen those partnerships. So through the chair, would the Minister explain what the Ministry is doing through Budget 2025 to support First Nations and Indigenous communities regarding policing, recognizing the unique challenges and needs that they may face? Thank you.
So thank you. Of course, we support First Nations, Indigenous policing in the province of Alberta. We currently have a few First Nations police services. Sutina, of course, comes to mind. Blood comes to mind. Lakeshore is also up in northern Alberta that services about 5 First Nations communities. And all 3 have, of course, indicated to us that they need improvements to their buildings and facilities. So we're making sure we're providing more than $30.9 million to support policing in First Nations communities and helping them to get those buildings. I would just further add that we have a number of First Nations communities throughout the province that are also looking to do their own police services. In the Edmonton region, Enoch comes to mind. Siksika Nation is another one that comes to mind. Siksika Nation is probably the first First Nations community in probably about 14 years in Canada that is really moving its way into what we call stage 2 of their development. And I can tell you that all of this is very much heavy lifting, but again, it goes back to, as my friend has stated, and that I have stated, again, not an arm of the state, an extension and reflection of the community that we serve.
Thank you so much, Minister. That concludes the government member's first block of time. Now we move to the second round of questions and responses. The speaking rotation going forward will be the same as in the first round, starting with the official opposition, then members of the government caucus. However, the speaking times are now reduced to 5 minutes for the duration of the meeting. We will begin this rotation with members of the official opposition, who will now have 5 minutes for questions and comments, followed by a response from the minister, who may speak up to 5 minutes. After both individuals have had an opportunity to speak once, we will then move on to the next caucus in rotation. If the member and the minister agree to share time, we will proceed with a 10-minute segment, during which time neither the member nor the minister may speak for more than 5 minutes at a time. Members are reminded that they may not cede any unused portion of their 5 minutes to another member. All right, so member and minister, do you wish to share or have block time?
I would love to share time with the minister. Is that Melanie?
And you're going to continue on with some more questions?
Yes.
Sorry?
We're gonna take a 5-minute break as discussed earlier in the meeting.
So did you want to take the break now? Are we? You know what, the other group is meeting right now, and so it would be more efficient if we waited until after this segment. But Mr. Singh, if you would like to use the washroom yourself, please feel free to go anytime. But let us not delay, let us head over to,
I was thinking about the minister, Madam Chair.
you're good. So after this segment, we'll take the break. But right now, the other team from the other estimate session is having their break time. So it would be more efficient if we waited just after this segment.
Sure, and I just want to say, I don't mind sharing time, but to MLA Shepherd, my staff have some numbers here that, for the questions, if you'd like to.
Certainly.
Yeah,
Let's
sure. Before you
start
get to
there.
your-
Yes,
yeah.
by all
So
means.
if we can go to my deputy minister here, she can answer some of your questions here.
Sure, thank you, and through Madam Chair, and apologies for not introducing myself last time. For the record, Ryan Lajeunesse, Deputy Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. So to the question about the amount dedicated for sheriff's training and the sheriff's budget, that's approximately $6 million within the sheriff's budget line. But we also have a training academy in the ministry. The total budget for the training academy is $7.3 million. Now, that training academy would support some elements of sheriff's training, but also do some training for correctional and other community peace officers. So the total answer for the sheriffs is $6 million proper within their budget, and then an additional amount supported in that secondary budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Lajeunesse. I appreciate that additional information. Pivot to a few questions here about community safety. Looking at line 5.2, Community and Public Safety Services, I do see that this line is, there's a significant cut, about 38%, from 14.6 million to 9.1 million. Now, can the minister explain the reason for this cut and how much applies to each of the elements that are funded here, those being the Human Trafficking Office and Victim Services?
Oh, the human trafficking. Yeah, so I think I know where you're going with that one. So victim services, of course, is, first of all, that's extremely important. We make sure that we're, again, predictable, sustainable funding for communities right across the province, and making sure that all the needs are met. And as many folks are aware, I think that we had over 16 municipalities that had no victim services. So again, and I think I always see nodding of the heads when I say this, which is predictable, sustainable funding, as opposed to not having that, to make sure that the needs are met for people across Alberta. When it comes to human trafficking, it's one of those things where we're just trying to be good, we'll call it stewards, financial stewards there. There was, an estimation for the Center to Combat Human Trafficking of, I think it was, I can't remember what the number was, but we'll say, it was a very high number, let me just say that. And then as we consulted with both the co-chairs of the Human Trafficking Organization, much of that money, as they're continuing to be in development of creating the Center to Combat Human Trafficking, a lot of that money was not necessarily being used at that particular time. So at this point here, what we have indicated to the Center to Combat Human Trafficking is that it becomes it goes as a kind of a as needed basis. So we made an announcement regarding $5 million just the other day. They think they handed out a number of grants to certain organizations that, of course, support victims of human trafficking.
Minister, I appreciate that clarification. I'm sorry, just we have much less time in these 10-minute blocks. I do appreciate that clarification. So what I hear the minister saying is that the reduction here is an agreed upon reduction with the co-chairs of the Human Trafficking Office, because they did not require as much. I understand. Thank you, Minister. Just another question in regards to that. So in the business plan, outcome 3, there's a list of $12 million for the Victims of Crime Assistance Program, and then $26.8 million for external partner organizations to provide supports and services. But the line 5.2, which contains victim services, only contains $9 million. So I just want to understand where these additional dollars being referenced in the business plan are coming from. Are they contained in other line items in this budget, or are they coming from other ministries that are somehow supporting these services, or is this a projection over multiple years?
Thank you very much. We have Ross Nairn, ADM, responsible for this particular portfolio. Will be able to answer that question for you.
Thanks, Mr. Minister, Madam Chair. Just regarding Victims of Crime and Public Safety Fund, I draw the members' attention to the Consolidated Statement of Operation. Victims of Crime and Public Safety Fund, the amount in budget 2025-26 is estimated at 38.832 million, which consists of both the Victims Assistance Program as well as the reference figures that go to supporting the regional victim, the RVSSs that provide the victim services support, as well as some of the other grant programs that we provide to various organizations in support of victims across the province.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the gentleman. I appreciate that clarification. Those amounts are coming from the consolidated operations. I just wanted to, and we've got about just under 5 minutes. So, through you to the minister, we were both at his policing plenary the other week. I know we saw a councillor from Chestermere, the mayor of Magerville, both raised with the minister concerns about growing social disorder in their communities and the pressures that they are seeing on their local police enforcement and the costs involved in that. I know the mayor of Vegreville, in fact, referenced that his officers in his community are constantly tied up in mental health calls. Now, the minister responded and sort of spoke about Counseling Alberta, and I recognize their services. I don't know that they're the most applicable to the issues that they're dealing with. He also spoke of the Compassionate Care Act, and again, I recognize that may be a tool that could be of some use, but it's something that's going to take some considerable investment and some time to stand up. So I know the minister is well aware and has spoken about, indeed, the impact we've had with the PAC teams, the help teams, others within the cities of Edmonton and Calgary. We have the RCMP, RPAC teams that are out in the community, I think that offer much more direct and immediate assistance, and I think expanding some of those pieces could be more effective in the short term. Is there anything in this budget that looks towards helping increase those sorts of services, or even as we are looking at increasing the police-like operations of Alberta sheriffs, looking to indeed ensure they have that training, but helping to ensure that we, in our municipalities, we are dealing with a wide range of costs that have been downloaded from government on various fronts, cuts to FCSS, even just things like having to pay for hand counting ballots in the fall. Is the minister looking at any ways to assist with getting more of those social services out into the community, those conversations he's maybe having with his colleagues in cabinet, to help ensure that police are able to do their jobs in the community?
So, thank you. I think if you remember what I also said is I am not opposed to PAC teams and help teams. I'm not opposed to SROs. Unfortunately, the RCMP are not able to meet the authorized strength levels, and right now they are prioritizing calls to service over anything else. I am also not going to put a we'll call it a crisis response worker or a social worker in a position where they are attending a potentially dangerous call, as you remember I said this, as occurred in Saskatchewan, whereby that person can get serious injury or death. So I support these programs. Happy to continue to work with the RCMP to figure out a solution to make sure that they not only have the officers that can do those particular calls, but also making sure that whether it be community and social services or working with mental health and addictions, to also make sure that they are able to supply folks for the people that need it as well. And I think you remember that in Edmonton, I think it was mental health and addictions that worked with the Edmonton Police Service to provide the supports for the help teams. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the minister. One last quick question. We'll see if we can get this in. In terms of expanding, asking community peace officers to take on more responsibilities and the minister's recent request to assign them to police, is the minister looking at the request that has been made, I think, by the AAPG and others to move community peace officers then to be covered under ACERT? So if we're asking them to take on more serious tasks, or is he then looking at having them be part of what can be investigated by the serious response team, incident serious response team?
I'm sure the member is aware when we passed that legislation that that is part of it. So the peace officers will be part of ACERT investigations.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Then through you to the minister. We've got about 10 seconds left. So I will just say thank you again to whomever was working to find those training dollars and that number for me. Appreciate that coming through, and I look forward to the next block of questions.
All right, thank you so much. It's 5-minute break time, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll resume back to the the government side. Member McDougall, you're up with your questions. Please proceed.
Thank you very much.
Blocked or shared time.
Share time, please.
Minister?
Sure, yep, thank you.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on an element of what we were just talking about earlier, and that relates to human trafficking. There's been a lot of attention placed on this issue recently. For me, the documentary Not in My City, a couple years back, has raised a lot of attention around certainly North America about the issue. And some of the things that are taking place. I had the pleasure of going to attending a fundraiser in the last couple of weeks from the documentary Sound of My Freedom, but the fundraiser for Not in My City, a group supported by Paul Brandt and his wife Liz Brandt, as you may be aware of, raising money for that. Very, very good charitable organization. Human trafficking is one of the greatest evils of our time, I would say. Worse if it happens in our own communities. Just out of sight, generally. The key objective 2.4 of the Ministry Business Plan is highlighting the commitment to protecting vulnerable populations through focused work to support the victims and survivors of human trafficking in the province. I see that through budget 2025.2 million is allocated to directing and the community initiatives to combat the human trafficking, and I think we just talked about that a couple minutes ago. Would the minister explain what specific initiatives are being implemented to combat human trafficking, including prevention, intervention, and prosecution efforts?
So, well, thank you, and I would agree with you. It is one of the greatest evils of our time. I know I used to, man. Sorry, you're just making me think back my time working on the street and dealing with some of these young people that were extremely vulnerable, and especially who's even more vulnerable are all of our friends, and especially the women in the First Nations communities that have been extremely impacted by human trafficking. So again, it becomes a community approach, no different than when we were dealing with drugs or any sort of societal issue. It becomes, how do we deal with this as a society? First of all, I think we also have to accept that this is wrong. That a pimp is not a business associate. A pimp is somebody who's living off of the veils of others. Many of these, and it can affect men, but I'm going to say primarily women, so just forgive me here for talking about it from we'll say the woman's perspective, but these women are preyed upon. They are, and as eloquently pointed out by Mr. Brandt, who I would argue has become very much a subject matter expert in this particular field. When we as law enforcement come across people like this, they tend to say, no, I'm where I want to be. This is the life I choose to live. When in fact that is actually the influence of the essentially the oppressor, that person who is the pimp, who has that psychological impact on them. The perfect example of that is actually here in Edmonton. When we had the encampment issue in Edmonton, where we had thousands of encampments, there was voices out there that said that this is a homeless issue, whereby the police service was saying that many of these encampments were drug-led, run by organized crime. So it became very much a collaborative effort between social services, community social services, law enforcement community. Long story short, when the bad guys got the drug dealers and all these oppressors ran away as the cowards that they are, what we were left was the true victims of drugs, human trafficking as an example. And the story that was really worth mentioning again was the woman who walked into a navigation center who was on the missing, murdered, and women's list for well over 10 years. And when the drug dealers walked away and the human traffickers walked away and fled, she realized at that point that there actually might be some help out there. I was very proud that we were able to reunite her with her family who thought that she was dead. So I always push back on anyone who says that this is what a person wants, this is the life they choose to lead. Because I can tell you as a police officer, if I was to take her aside, she would say that. It was only until we got those oppressors out of the way that she felt finally, after 10 years, free enough to go and actually get the help that she needs. So there's a multitude of ways we're doing this. $5.2 million. We made an announcement fairly recently for the Center to Combat Human Trafficking. Mr. Brandt, along with his team, were able to hand out various grants to great organizations throughout this province that are really supporting women. There's a number of Indigenous-led not-for-profit organizations that are helping these folks as well. So that's just one element of this. I know I'm working with Minister Amory's office. It's not in the budget, but I think it's important to note. We're working with Minister Amory's, or not my budget, but we're working with Minister Amory's office to also make sure that we have a Crown prosecutor that will be dedicated to these sort of files, because these are extremely complex files.
How will this initiative provide the comprehensive support to the victims and survivors of human trafficking, including immediate assistance, long-term care, rehabilitation services?
So there, although many of these young people, I say young people because typically they are, but they can be older, of course. Sure, there's an addictions component to it. Many of them have various levels of addiction, but we also understand that there's a specialized trauma-informed supports for these victims, and especially the survivors of human trafficking. So this is how we're trying to. We can't just lump somebody who has been trafficked for X number of years. And although we're doing some great work regarding the recovery-oriented system of care and the stuff regarding people that have addictions issues, this unfortunately is many of these women have been traumatized so badly that we have to take some extra special care in dealing with their trauma. So again, there's a preventative component of this. We of course there's a protection component of this, and then another key pillar here is an empowerment component of this, and it's really about giving many of these women their lives back. And in a lot of these cases, I will just say that, and I would say anything in all my experience regarding people with addictions or anybody that's dealt with trauma, it's really that peer support, right? And peer support is key. It's one thing for me to sit there and say something. Many people will say, well, you don't get it, you don't understand, you've never been there. But when you have many of these wonderful survivors who can be there now as community leaders to really help these girls, and of course men, but mostly girls, really get their lives back together, that's really what we're trying to do here.
Agreed that, it's a complex, very complex issue with a lot of elements to this, which I guess, would make it difficult, I can imagine. And I guess the question is how do you track progress? I mean, what's the metrics, or how do you achieve your, the key objective, or how you measure that you're achieving the key objective under 2.4?
Well, I think it's like anything that we're focused on outcomes, right? So what I want to see from not just the Center to Combat Human Trafficking, but I want to see, hopefully through the Center of Human Trafficking to those not-for-profit organizations, is that, for the taxpayer, which I would say in Alberta are extremely compassionate people, they want to make sure that money actually has an outcome, right? So when I hear I can speculate, but I mean, the reality is when I start hearing success stories about how a specific organization is able to help somebody, remove them from the evils of human trafficking and help them to get their life back together, like that young lady that went to the Navigation Center example, that's how we start to measure the success.
Thank you so much, Minister. We'll head back to the official opposition. Sugar blocked.
Share it if we could, Madam
Minister,
Chair.
just checking in. You're good? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister, I have a couple things I hope we can touch on in this block, so perhaps we can collaborate to sort of make use of the time so we can fit both pieces in. The first piece, I'd just like to talk a little bit about victim services. I've had the opportunity to talk with municipal officials, some of the frontline workers who are providing support under the new regional model. And they have raised some concerns about gaps in services, a loss of frontline staff, some increased red tape under the new regional model. I've heard that the South Region at present has no on-call coverage, therefore no services or supports available evenings and weekends. I've heard that in the East Region, there are 3 workers currently covering 9 RCMP detachments. Workers have spoken to me with concerns about new restrictions on the kinds of calls they're able to respond to and when. So just through you, Madam Chair, I just want to ask the Minister, does he feel the new model has been successful so far, and what metrics is his department tracking to assess the impacts, whether positive or negative, of this change to the new model?
Hang on, where's the... Thank you. I'm going to get Ross Nairn to come up here as well. Sorry. Yeah. Let me just say this before we start. There have been a lot of anecdotal stories, and when complaints come in, Ross and his department investigate them, and then we find out them to be inconsistent with what we'll say the allegation is. I will say that we have certainly had a lot of positive feedback. The new governance model included 150 paid frontline staff, up to 132. We have the Mayor, Megan Hansen from the town of Sylvan Lake, who has nothing but complimentary things. A letter from the RCMP, again, saying that the model serves as a remedy to some of the challenges experienced the existing model. So support by the RCMP, support by many communities. In fact, again, you talk about the 16 communities that had no victim services whatsoever. I mean, again, predictable, sustainable funding. If somebody indicates, as you have indicated, and I hope you let Mr. ADM Nairn know this, if there is a gap, then Ross and his team will obviously address that gap and make sure that is there. But every time Ross has been tasked with doing that, unfortunately, that has been inconsistent to what the allegation is. But Ross, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Minister. Madam Chair, just to follow up on the Minister's comments, the new 4 region RVSS model took effect on the 1st of October. I would still say we're in implementation phase in terms of the last 6 months. There are staff from the former victim services units that join the RVSSs and are doing some of that work. There's growing pains, without a doubt, but there'd be growing pains anytime that you take 62 different organizations all doing different things. There is no consistency from a provincial perspective. And what we were trying to do from a department is provide a level of consistency that an Albertan in the northwest corner or an Albertan in the southeast corner are all getting similar type of services from our victim services organizations. Just in terms of the member flagging the after-hours support specifically for the southern Alberta area of the RVSSs, yes, they currently have a challenge around after-hours crisis response in that area. However, they've been working diligently, sir, and they will begin operations of a formal after-hours response as of April 5th, to be specific. And that will include everything from phone support all the way through to in-person support. And to the Minister's comment, as issues come up, as concerns come up from communities, and again, we're trying to provide consistency throughout the province, as concerns come up, our staff work with the chief executive officers of all those 4 independent regions and ensure that we're providing a consistent level of service as best as possible and consistent with what's being looked at by the community.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to him and the minister for that response. And I appreciate that update, and I'm very glad that the Southern Region is going to have access to those services. In the second half, I was hoping we could talk briefly about correctional facilities. Of course, this being budget line item 3.2, custody operations, and again, under key objectives 2.1 and 2.3. In October, we saw 3 deaths at the Edmonton Remand Center in the space of 3 weeks. That brought the year's total at that time to 4. Then in December, we saw 2 more deaths in the space of 2 days. So we don't have a lot of time, but what I will recognize through you to the minister is that it seems that this is challenging for the minister to be able to properly understand where these concerns are and how to handle them, how to address them, when we have the challenge of the fatality inquiry system and the significant delays. My understanding is on the current list, there's a case as old as 2017. So I just wanted to ask the minister, in terms of addressing these sorts of situations where we have what seemed to be a spate of deaths in the space of 3 months in a single facility, when we have these challenges, these delays in the system, is this a conversation he's having with the Minister of Justice about how we can address some of those, and how does the minister ensure that he is able to properly understand what is happening here so we can take some concrete actions? Because certainly I think the loss of a life in a correctional facility is probably one of the most concerning things to see occur. I know that the minister, I'm sure the minister finds this concerning and does want to address it. I just want to understand a bit better of how this takes place within the system and what the minister's next steps are going to be.
So we have some wonderful experts here. I have to ask this though, because what line item budget are you referring to on this one?
Again, referring to budget line item 3.2, custody operations, key objectives 2.1, working with police and community ministry and government partners to improve alignment of mental health, et cetera, in community policing and corrections, and then technological improvements in correctional services to enhance service delivery.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I would just say I can't agree with you more. Any death is one too many as far as I'm concerned. But I'm going to get my deputy minister and my assistant deputy minister to speak on this, both whom have extraordinary experience in corrections.
Great, thank you very much. I'll start. So in terms of the Edmonton Remand Center, so the first point to note for sure, as Minister said, any death is one too many. The Edmonton Remand Center in particular is our largest facility by far. So there is a disproportionate number of the total inmate population in that facility. In addition to the fatality inquiry process that you've referenced, we also conduct a board of inquiry internally, and that happens immediately when we have a serious or sensitive incident in a facility. And within this particular budget, you will have heard with Minister's opening remarks that we are adding staff to conduct more medical transport from facilities to local hospitals. So that will actually help us better respond to emergent situations that might occur in a jail. But I'll call on Fiona Lavoie, the ADM of Correctional Services, to supplement that.
Hello, Fiona Lavoie. I'm the ADM for Correctional Services. Just in follow-up, Madam Chair, to the comments made by the Deputy Minister, yes, we do conduct a board of inquiry, which is a mandated investigation and review of the situation when deaths occur in custody, and that's something through our corrections legislation and regulation, and there are learnings from those events that we take into consideration on a go-forward basis. And as it was also mentioned, the Edmonton Remand Centre houses approximately half of the provincial population in custody in the province. And so, as was mentioned, it is a bit of a larger percentage of individuals that are in custody that we see at that facility compared to the 9 other centres within the province.
Thank you to the minister and his staff, through you, Madam Chair, for those answers to those questions. And for the collaboration, making best use of the limited time we have. I'll perhaps put in one last question, last minute we have here. Looking at all line items in the budget and the total amount of spending, are there any amounts contained in any of these line items for any contracts with the firm Rubicon Strategies?
No.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate it. Indeed. So I, through you, Madam Chair, I will commend the minister on his efficiency. And so, no, I certainly do appreciate the collegiality of the conversation we've been able to have so far. So I look forward to returning after the government members.
No, it's good to laugh during these sessions, so thank you for the humor, members. Let's turn it over to the government side. We have Mr. Singh up next. Shared or block time?
Share time if it's okay with the minister. Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, and I thank you for coming here today. I also want to express my appreciation to the ministry's works and initiatives on keeping Albertans safe and secure and ensuring Alberta is prepared for and resilient to the impacts of disasters. And my questions are on external partners for victim services. I would like to highlight key objective 3.2 on page 139 of the business plan. It's all about continuing to work with the public safety and community partners to deliver stable and consistent victim services across the province. In support of key objective 3.2, I see budget 2025 is committing 26.8 million to external partners organization to provide supports and services to victims of crime, including the implementation of the new victim service delivery model. And I would like to focus my question on this line of support for victims for crime. And would the minister please explain how will these funds be allocated to this external organization who provide supports and services to victims of crime?
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the member for the outstanding work that he does for the people, of course, of Calgary East. Thank you very much for the work that you do. He's always, of course, raising with me public safety concerns, and I thank him for that. Look, victim services, as ADM Naren had mentioned, of course, we're going to have some growing pains. But again, it's about consistency throughout the province. It's about predictable and sustainable funding. Many of the organizations that we have talked to, they want to know, communities that we talk to, they say, can we volunteer? Can we fundraise? Yes, the answer is yes, right? But we just don't want you to be solely reliant on that sort of way to fundraise for victim services, right? So having predictable, sustainable funding, and many, if not all, of the communities throughout Alberta that want to be able, especially the small ones, that want to be able to help victims of crime, victims of tragedy, people that want to volunteer, people that want to fundraise, absolutely, you can go do that, right? But that predictable, sustainable funding, the consistency, this is the sort of stuff that we want to provide information on the criminal justice system. The rights of victims, I think, are very important for people to know, to provide information on victims assistance programs, support victims that mitigate the impact of crime, acting as a link between victims and the criminal justice system. Many people don't know about the criminal justice system, right? And I know you're very proud of your son, who's been, very, very much getting involved in law enforcement as an example. And, he has, knowledge that other people don't about the justice system. So when somebody's a victim of a crime or a victim of tragedy, making sure that there is that link to help those individuals is critical. And I'll go back to what ADM Naren said, or in fact, even what I said. If there is a gap, right, that doesn't mean that's an entire failure of the system. What we saw in the previous model was a failure in the system, having the 16 communities that had no services whatsoever, and many others who were on the brink of collapse, if I'm not mistaken. So right now, predictable, sustainable funding, people to provide the guides through the system, and then making sure that we are actually getting folks the needs. But let me be clear here, because I think it's very, very important that if you are part of a small town and you want to volunteer and you want to help fundraise and do extra above and beyond, absolutely, we're all welcome to that. But they're a critical role. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for the answer here. And my next question is on disaster management through you, Chair. Outcome 4 on page 139 of the business plan tasks the ministry with ensuring Alberta is prepared and resilient to the impacts of disasters. Just last year, we saw the devastating impact of wildfires across our province, including Jasper. Key Objective 4.1 highlights supporting Albertans and their communities to raise their awareness of disaster risk, preventive actions, and I will focus my questions on preventive awareness and preventive actions. And would the Minister please explain how the ministry will work to raise awareness through Budget 2025, and what are some of the key components strategized by the government on effective emergency management plan, including risk management, mitigation strategies, response protocols, and recovery plans?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to go to ADM Lacroix in just one moment. I'm going to talk at a very, very high level, because you did talk a little bit about Jasper, and one of the things that Alberta Emergency Management does is provide the education and training to municipalities all throughout this province. And I look at what occurred in Jasper as, here's where I see this as being a success. The fact that around 25,000 people were able to be evacuated in a coordinated effort with not even as much as a traffic accident, to me, is a success not just to the municipality, but to Alberta Emergency Management, to making sure that that community had all the tools and resources in the toolbox, that when the crisis hit, they knew what to do, right? And so that's part of the success of Alberta Management, and I'll let Steve talk about the details.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be blunt as usual. I'm not too worried about awareness. I think Mother Nature has done a pretty good job at making people aware of the risk associated with natural disasters in our beautiful province. Preparedness is where I'm at. And so we are developing a number of strategies informed on post-incident assessments and collaboration with other ministries. As an example, we're working with Forestry and Parks right now, and they're developing a flood and fire mitigation strategy. So that should be coming through this winter, actually, before it's over. We have a small but mighty preparedness team that surveys Albertans and identifies gaps as to where we need to maybe double down on our efforts in not them being aware of natural disasters, but having their own individual plans to take care of themselves in the face of an emergency. We have field officers that visit the metric there, to Emily Shepard's point there. 90% of municipalities every year, last year we hit 100 actually, and validate their emergency response plans. If not help build those emergency response plans, their evacuation plans, their emergency social services plan. We have another team that deals in hazard identification and risk assessment, and that team is moving from building the tool to now implementing the tool. And we have a bit of a roadshow starting right now. We've already hit 2 communities off the top of my head, Lethbridge and Cochrane. And that will help communities identify the risk, which is important, but more importantly, I think, how to treat that risk and make necessary investments to make their communities more resilient. I spoke about emergency social services. We have some training now coming online and in person to help communities deal with the large numbers of evacuees that we've had over the last couple of years, something like 23,000 just in the past year. And that will help communities hosting those evacuees who are all facing very challenging times to how to deal with them and standard levels provided to them. We also conduct tabletop exercises. Actually, we're running one next week, a province-wide tabletop exercise on emergency management, and we also participate in municipal-led ones. And lastly, I would say I would be remiss if I did not thank all the municipalities in Alberta that have stepped up to help their neighbors in need, including ones from other jurisdictions. If I go back to 2023 with the Northwest Territories, and have done an absolutely outstanding job at wrapping their arms around people in distress over the last couple of years. So I think we're fairly well set up for what's coming up this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the minister and his team. We'll turn it over to the official opposition with Ms. Gorey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister. Hi. How are you?
Good, yourself?
Good. So,
Sorry, are you doing blocked or shared time?
Oh.
We'll share it.
Thank you. So I'm asking questions today based on my role as being the liaison for the CAF and for Veterans Affairs. I know that I've worked with some of your people in your ministry over some of the community concerns that have been brought forward from veterans, so that's kind of where my line of questioning is going. I have to say, Minister, that I'm pretty disappointed that out of all of the ministry documents, not just yours, but the entire government's documents for this budget, the word veteran isn't in here once. So when I'm thinking about what the support could be for veterans and should be when it comes to government, and knowing that you have somewhat overseen this community, I'm curious why there's no mention of veterans in here. I know that there's initiatives that are happening around the province. I know that there's been some attempts at collaboration with the government. And knowing that the veterans community is really struggling right now with homelessness, addictions, mental health, and there's been pleas for government to have a streamline for veterans. I'm curious if there's any sort of budget line or anything in this budget that directly links to supporting veterans.
Well, thank you. So I couldn't agree with you more in regards to the support for veterans. I don't want to out my ADM here, but he was a military veteran himself, and he, sorry, Stevie, you're head of the Veterans Homeless Society.
Yeah, Homes for Heroes.
Homes for Heroes, right? So, although MLA Wright certainly reports to me, I can tell you that we have had discussions. One of the, we can call it a, some might call it a lofty aspiration. I would call it something that I think can be very realistic, and I'll get to that in a moment here. But what I've, one of the things I've tasked MLA Wright doing, and even taking ADM Lacroix's role as ADM, that has nothing to do with it, but his Homes for Heroes. We know who those I would say officers, but we know who those soldiers are that need that help. And through Stephen's other role, working with MLA Wright, not only do we want to make sure that those folks are identified, but also getting the necessary supports that they need. So, do I have a specific line item budget as it relates to law enforcement or corrections? No, but I don't consider that a bad thing. This is not about putting handcuffs on anybody, quite frankly, or in a correctional facility. It's about making sure. So I'll just, and I know people are going to say, you're not talking about the budget. Okay, but hang on. This is very important as well, and I don't disagree with you on this, right? What I would like to see is that homelessness for veterans ends in this province, right? And I see everybody nodding their heads, and I think everybody would agree with me on that, right? I know there's other governments in the past that had lofty goals about ending homelessness in a province or in Canada or whatever the case may be. A lot of variables there, really, really tough. But I think that with veterans, I think that is actually a realistic thing that we can do. So what I have asked MLA Wright to do is, again, in Stephen's other role as a volunteer, work with him on that, but also work with community and social services, working with mental health and addictions, so that when those individuals are identified, we want to make sure that they actually have a pathway to getting the help that they need. And then again, when we talk about entering the system, journey of recovery and exiting the system, again, in Steve's volunteer role, making sure that we have homes for heroes for them to exit into. So apologize for not being a line item budget, but I think you and I are actually very much in sync on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And when it comes to housing homeless veterans, one of the barriers that we're seeing, I sit on several committees within the veterans community, and it is mental health and addictions, that a lot of the homes that support people transitioning out of homelessness don't actually want people that have mental health and addictions. So when we look at the veterans community, there's a higher rate of PTSD. So there's a significant amount of supports that should be enhanced when we're looking at homelessness. And I'm grateful that you're open to looking at that. And I would love to be a part of those conversations. You mentioned policing and security. And so that's another question that I have related to the budget is when it comes to veterans, we know that many after exiting the CAF go into those types of careers. So I'm curious if you're open to exploring with post-secondary or other sort of training initiatives that would support that transition. We have Helmets to Hard Hats that focuses on the trades. Is there any sort of incentive or idea that you would like to work with veterans to help transition them into those security type careers?
Sure, I think that was part of the reason why the commissioners were set up. And you know, although, sorry, the world's evolving, had me thinking geopolitically for a second here, but, you know, it's been many, many years since, you know, World War, right? But the reality is that, you know, the commissioners are certainly an avenue into kind of a security. I know in my own personal experience, I started as a security guard and eventually worked my way up into law enforcement. So there is that sort of pathway. In regards to other avenues, sure, open to exploring any sort of other opportunities. Look, I think with anything, again, I'm going to talk slightly again when we talk about again the recovery-oriented system of care. What we're talking about again, entering a system. Agree with me, helping people with their mental health addictions issue, right? But when we say exiting the system, we're exiting the system where you have a job and you have a place to live, right? So it's not, here's your ticket to the homeless shelter, good luck with life. As we see, that is where the cycle of abuse falls off the rails. So, you know, through the Homes for Heroes, through any sort of other organization, and I'll just off the top of my head say the commissionaires, making sure that once that person is identified, they've got help for their severe mental health and addictions issue, and then making sure that we can transition them into that job and into a place to live. That's how you stop that cycle. So I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
I think this is all great news to hear that. What I'm curious about, are you open to having a specific line item for funding within your ministry that would actually help to support focused on transitioning veterans with the lens of coming from the veterans community? So having those members come forward to say what their needs are to help kind of direct it, sort of like a liaison from that community to have voice at the table. When we were government and I was the government liaison, we had a cross-ministry working group that included CAF members, regular force and reserve, and members from the veterans community that came together to talk about ways to support government funding and transitioning. Are you open to that?
Well, I mean, I'm open to it being somewhere. I'm trying to, again, figure out, I appreciate the fact that MLA Wright reports to me, but like I don't really have a, I mean, he could technically report to any minister. I think he reports to me because I'm the deputy premier. So I'm not entirely sure that, I see where you're going with this, and I'm actually not opposed to that. I'm trying to figure out if that would fall under public safety and emergency services, I'm not entirely sure that. Jet maybe, you know, this is, you know, I'm not saying it doesn't fit in government. The question would be, where would it fit in government? So that's kind of where I'd answer that one, right? But not opposed to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Those are really all my questions.
Look, let me say this. So otherwise, we'll have MLA Shepherd having to kill time and thank everybody in the room here for the next 50 seconds. Sorry, I'm glad we could have a good time. Look, I just want to say again, just in regards to the veterans community, and again, when MLA Wright was, we'll say assigned to me, obviously as a deputy premier, I take this very seriously. I'm very humbled and honored to work with military veterans, former law enforcement, community veterans, and their service to this nation, I think, is second to none. So, as far as us as a community, regardless of your political stripe, figuring out how to give back to them, you know, I have members of my own family that are veterans themselves. You know, they don't ask for anything. These are very humble people. This is why, unfortunately, you see them when you see them on the streets. They don't really ask for help or want the help. It's almost like you got to force them to get help because that's that pride that they have in them. But that's because they're honorable people. But you know, addictions can affect anybody.
So much, Minister.
Thanks.
We're moving over to the government side. Member Johnson, shared or block time with the minister?
Please, if the minister's willing.
Minister?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the minister. First, thank you for coming here today, for being so prepared with all of your staff, for the great answers, and for even getting those answers on the fly. Sure appreciate that and for all you do. I'd like to talk a little bit about the readiness and resilience in the event of a disaster and how that fits into the budget. I had the privilege, the very rare privilege, really, of being on the trauma team for the re-entry of the evacuees after the Fort Mac fires. And went up there with a nonprofit group and got to go to the high trauma area. And it's life-changing. We slept in a homeless shelter for the week, us as volunteers, and it gave me new eyes to see how important it is that we be ready, that we be resilient for these types of horrific events. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. Performance measure 4B on page number 140 of the business plan surveys the percentage of Albertans who have taken at least 3 preparedness actions in the past year. According to the document, this measure is based on the results of the Preparedness Survey of Albertans conducted annually by AEMA. It goes on to say the measure demonstrates Alberta's readiness and resilience in the event of a disaster. And that actual result was 50% in 2024. The target for 25-26 is set at 55%. So first, would the minister explain how Budget 2025 would enable this great target to be reached?
Well, thank you. You know, I'll go to ADM Lacroix again on this one here, but really the continued investment in what's known as Be Prepared, right? And you heard me talk about this before. Regardless of the community, and everybody has the potential to face various disasters. I myself was the first responder in the 2013 flood in Calgary, as an example. Which is, there was a couple of events in Calgary, but this is partly the reason why they have themselves their own emergency management system in Calgary. But obviously, smaller communities do not have that luxury as say, Calgary and Edmonton. So part of what Alberta Emergency Management does is to make sure that all communities are prepared. I remember the Carstairs area, there was, of course, the threat of tornadoes as an example. Obviously, forest fires, which are the last 2 years have been top of everybody's mind, making sure that proper evacuation plans, proper plans to make sure that you have the necessary food and water to even last a certain amount of time. But maybe I'll just go to Steve just to supplement that a bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I alluded to our Be Prepared team. They're small but mighty. I would say that leveraging the 2023 season, actually, we received some additional funding for additional staff on that team that were onboarded last year. And that gives us the ability to be more deliberate, I was talking about the surveys before, it also allowed us to interact with a number of organizations that we just simply did not have the time to deal with in the past in a cogent way. So we're getting not only into people's homes, of course, that we already did that. It allows us to collaborate with educators, which we didn't necessarily do in a deliberate way in the past. So no fear mongering there, but we're sowing the seeds there in our young Albertans in terms of their own preparedness and leveraging teachers and schools. Academia is also being targeted as a whole on that front, which I think is a great idea. The other thing that it's enabled us to do is also target vulnerable populations, racialized communities in their languages, having the products available. And I'm just going off the top of my head, but I think it's 28 different languages across the province being made available in terms of individuals, family units, communities having their own preparedness plans to deal with a fire coming through or towards their community, a flood, or you name the natural disaster. So those are all the types of initiatives that we've rolled out that will continue to roll out in 2025, leveraging the budget that is at debate right now. Thank you.
Well, through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that answer. It actually covered a couple of other questions following, and maybe you can expand on them a little more. With a more fulsome answer even, I'm curious about how individuals and families first can take the actions that they can take to prepare for disasters. And we heard the minister talk about tornadoes. I remember we drove by the Pine Lake tornado literally minutes after it happened, and emergency vehicles were, by the dozens coming in. So there's things like tornadoes and the Jasper fire and Fort Mac fires and floods and droughts. So what are some of the specific actions individuals and families can take to prepare? But also, I'll expand that into communities as well. And we've seen, I think in the last years, as we've seen some of these disasters coming up, communities really being proactive to prepare for this. So what are some more of these actions that we can support, including public awareness campaigns, like you mentioned, community workshops and more?
Let me start, and if I miss anything here, but I mean, it starts with knowing your area, right? And what your area might be vulnerable to, right? For example, the floods, the wildfires, severe storms, and then of course, staying thoroughly informed through emergency alerts, weather warnings. I know you talked specifically about the tornado. It's Steve, Climate Change Canada, is that correct? Right.
Yeah,
Environment and Climate Change Canada. That really, because they're going to give you the most up-to-date information at that particular moment, because it's weather, right? It can change any moment and go in multiple different directions. For individuals in communities, of course, they make sure you're practicing an emergency plan, that you talk about it with your family as an example on what to do. They need to decide if they get separated, how they're going to stay in touch, maybe meeting points as an example, in just in case they get separated during an emergency. And I talked about it earlier about the emergency kits. You should have at least 72 hours worth of food and water and medication. One thing that we've learned over the last couple of years, and we make sure that we reach out to the SPCA, is pet supports, right? Sometimes that's, a forgotten loved one that we don't want to forget. And so, the government, of course, works with the SPCA, and we have been, I know Steve and his team have built up a great relationship to make sure that pets are taken care of as well, as they are part of the family. Of course, in connecting with neighbors and local resources, I think is also critical, just to make sure nobody is left behind. A lot of times it's, in critical command, we call it kind of controlled chaos. And in that controlled chaos, we have to make sure that when you're talking to a person of authority, you know, they want to make sure that you not only have yourself, but you have your loved ones. So that's a critical component of that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Steve, but.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Madam Chair. Yeah, I would only add, like, something I always use with the team at AEMA is that, you know, training for the Olympics during the Olympics is not a great idea, and complacency will get you hurt. So, what we incentivize individual Albertans to do in their communities where they reside is to have those plans in place, exercise them, validate them, and you will identify some gaps probably within those plans, and then make the necessary arrangements with friends, neighbors, whether it's another community near you, to make those plans more resilient and, yeah, keep your people safe. So that's all I would say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister and his staff as well for those great answers. In light of the time, I will just maybe go on and we can expand again a little bit more. I think you've touched on this question as well, but we'll just go there briefly and expand upon it. What role does education and awareness that we've been talking about play in achieving these targets, the targets of 55%? And through Budget 2025, how is the government working to inform Albertans about disaster risks and preparedness measures?
Well, look, education and awareness is, of course, critical, and I clearly cited the example that we had in the Jasper area. I mean, yes, the local residents and with the leadership there to make sure that their residents, of course, were prepared and aware. But obviously, working with the local law enforcement, the local RCMP of jurisdiction was a critical piece to that. And again, I mean, you know, we have tens of thousands, if not more, visitors that come to Jasper.
Thank you so much. We'll move back over to the opposition. Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, if the minister is amenable, I'd be happy to once again go back and forth.
Back and forth.
I'm hoping Nicole would.
I'm sorry to disappoint the minister, but.
It's back and forth.
So, Madam Chair, my next question here is in regards, connected with a few different items here in the budget and business plan, connected with lines 2.5 and 2.2 in the budget, contract policing and policing oversight, and funding for ACERT. Also connected with a key objective 1.3, implementing strategies to improve the delivery of policing services in the province to ensure Albertans are safe and police are accountable to the communities they serve, and outcome 1 where the minister speaks of initiatives that best support contemporary responsive policing focused on the best interests of Alberta's diverse populations. And I will just provide a bit of a warning caveat that I'm going to talk about a little bit to sort of set up the context for the question I'm about to ask. So if you will indulge me in being able to provide some of that context, then I assure you these questions are directly related to the items I noted in the budget and business plan. So, Madam Chair, recently we saw a journalist report on notes that he obtained that were taken by the Chief of Calgary Police about conversations that he had with members of the government cabinet and their staff regarding the CPS's actions in response to a student protest at the University of Calgary and an ACERT investigation into those actions. According to those notes, there were attempts to contact the Premier the day of, conversations with her Chief of Staff, followed by the Minister of Advanced Education calling the Chief to express support. The Minister here today did speak with the Chief a few days later to inform him that there would be an ACERT investigation. Shortly after that, the Chief reportedly, according to the notes that were taken by the Chief, logged a phone call with Marshall Smith, the Chief of Staff for the Premier. According to Mr. Neufeld's notes, Chief Neufeld's notes, Smith assured him that ACERT would not.
We've had a point of order called. Go ahead, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The point of order is under Standing Order 23B. The member speaks to matters other than the question under discussion. I think we are not here to discuss media reporting. And Madam Chair, the committee has convened the purpose of considering the ministry's 25-26 budget, including estimates, fiscal plan, and business plan. The matter which the honorable member is trying to raise is not within the boundaries of our discussion today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not a point of order. And in fact, member prefaced that he will talk about the budget line item and business plan. And member really didn't let him finish his question. So on relevance, there is enough in House of Common rules and procedures that unless you know what member is asking, you cannot determine relevance. So if you cut a member in the halfway into his question, I don't know how you can make a case that it's not relevant when you didn't hear it. So I would say that it's not a point of order. A member didn't let the member finish his question and get to the end of it. So I would urge member to let members finish the question before they raise point of orders.
Thank you so much, member. So what I'll say about this is we'll leave it up to the minister's discretion whether he chooses to answer and how he answers. So please proceed, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. So as I was saying, the chief's notes indicate that he received a call from the Premier's Chief of Staff, Marshall Smith, who assured him that ACERT won't investigate. That's a direct quote from the notes that were taken by the chief. So again, looking at key objective 1.3, ensuring Albertans are safe and police are accountable to the communities they serve, and looking at the frequent comment that the minister has made, that his goal, his objective is a paradigm shift in which police are no longer seen as an arm of the state, but a reflection of the communities that they serve. It seems that having a chief of staff or a premier call to tell the chief whether or not an investigation would take place, that sure seems like the arm of the state. So in regards to this budget and business plan, and the minister's stated intentions in this plan to ensure police are accountable to the communities they serve, that their initiatives support and are focused on the best interests of Alberta's diverse populations, and ensuring the independence of decisions that are being made regarding the focus and scope of investigations conducted by ACERT, funded in line 2.2. What is the minister's intentions in terms of his actions in the next year, under this business plan, through this budget, to ensure that there is not even the appearance of political interference in decisions that are made around the scope of investigations that have such serious impact on Albertans?
So I can't speak to a conversation that I was not a part of or what may or may not have been said between two other individuals. I think everybody would understand that. I would just say that we have what is known as the Police Review Commission on a very high level. This Police Review Commission is meant to provide that arm's length and independence that the member is talking about, and whether it be through any form of a professional standards complaint process or where ACERT is investigating. And as we all know in this room, ACERT investigates complaints that have to do where somebody may have received an injury directly or indirectly as a result of a police officer's actions. So yeah, I mean, this is the exact reason why we're doing the Police Review Commission, and to make sure that we have that independence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope it would concern the minister. I mean, certainly that chief of staff is no longer here, but if I were the Minister of Public Safety, having a Premier's chief of staff interfere to comment on what is going to be the scope of the investigation, that would certainly concern me. In terms of body-worn cameras, the minister referenced funding for body-worn cameras or support for their implementation with Alberta sheriffs. Also just curious about what support there might be for local municipalities. Again, as I referenced earlier, municipal governments have seen an imposition and downloading of a lot of costs from this provincial government, whether that's, again, having to pay for the hand counting of ballots this fall, losses due to the new restrictions on photo radar, several years of reduced grants in lieu that have affected their ability to pay for policing services. They are now facing these increased costs. The minister was asked about this by a councillor from the city of Camrose, member of their police commission, at the policing plenary. Didn't directly answer the question, spoke about the Police Review Commission he's working on establishing, and commented that that would save costs for police services in terms of not having to mount their own investigations. So I just wanted to clarify with the minister that he is not intending to provide any funding to municipal councils to offset the cost of body-worn cameras that he's requiring them to buy, and in fact advising that police services should be able to absorb these costs within their current budgets due to the savings that he says he'll be providing through the new Police Review Commission.
So the ADM Zablocki and his team are reviewing that. I'm aware of that, Councillor. I talked to her even just the other day. As I said to her, and as I will say to you, the Calgary Police Service was able to figure this out without asking for any additional funds. The RCMP, I believe, have received funds, Curtis, correct me if I'm wrong, from the federal government. Is that correct?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, from the federal government in order to do that. One of the things that I have committed to both the AACP and to that particular counselor herself is that we would absorb the costs of the cloud. That cloud is could be quite costly, quite frankly. And I think on the advice of the folks in the department, if we are able to negotiate collectively with whoever that service provider is going to be, that would certainly reduce the costs. What the member is stating is correct. Police services are not going to require their own professional standards sections coming up very shortly. Certainly that is another opportunity to save additional money that they can reallocate into other areas. But let me be clear. I mean, the body-worn cameras, which we are the first jurisdiction in Canada to implement this provincial-wide, is extremely important. It's not only for the confidence of the people of Alberta, but for the officers themselves. I mean, in the end, it's really about public trust. And I'll pass it over to the MLA to give the last 15 seconds.
Thank you, Minister.
Sorry, go ahead and finish.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to the Minister, and I absolutely agree. Certainly, the implementation of body-worn cameras is an important step towards police accountability. And I'll just say thank you once again to the Minister and his staff for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much. Moving over to government side, Member Lunty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, want to, as we close our time here, reiterate thanks to the Minister and his team and his staff for all the work they do. I'm fortunate to have Nisku in my riding, and I've had numerous business owners in my office talking about the impact that property crime is having on their businesses. So this is certainly an economic issue in addition to a public safety issue. So I just want to pass along our thanks and their thanks for taking these issues very seriously and helping them.
I don't mean to interrupt, but is this shared time? I forgot to ask. Shared? Shared or block?
Sure.
Shared? Shared? Shared.
Thank you, Chair. So I would like to ask about the electronic bracelet monitoring program. And I think this is an important program, particularly in reference to violent repeat offenders. So this is on page 137 of the business plan. And I believe the investment is 5.7 million under budget 2025. I think it's important for the province to look to see what we can do on violent repeat offenders. I think it's fair to say some of us feel that the federal government is failing us on this issue. The catch and release program has certainly been highlighted, certainly a huge emphasis on the release part of that. So my question through the chair to the minister, would the minister explain how the electronic bracelet monitoring program offers more effective supervision and monitoring?
Sure. Thank you very much. I think as you previously mentioned, the soft and crime policies, the Bill C-75, the catch and release program, that has been not just a disaster for Albertans, but a disaster for Canadians. we in Alberta had to try and think outside of the box in order to provide a tool in the toolbox for the judiciary, for lawyers, as an example, whether it be a Crown prosecutor or even a defense attorney, as an example. And you're correct, we've allocated about $5.7 million. It's being run out of our corrections facilities. I think, we can get ADM Lavoie to speak on it a little bit more in detail, but really it's about providing that 24/7 monitoring. Right now, through the catch and release program, we're seeing very much a disaster of people not abiding by the rules set aside by the courts. And so this is going to be a tool in the toolbox, and we're really excited about that. But maybe my ADM wouldn't mind just talking a little bit more about the details from the corrections perspective and how they're implementing that program.
Hello, Fiona Lavoie, ADM for Correctional Services. So yes, the electronic monitoring program is operational, and it started in January of this fiscal year, and so it's quite new. The judiciary has been very engaged and involved, and we have just under 20 individuals at present under the program. And similar to other jurisdictions that have implemented, it's anticipated that it will continue to rise in the near future, but certainly has provided an additional tool for the courts to order 24/7 monitoring of individuals. It is, as was mentioned, an ankle bracelet that is affixed to the individual, and it is monitored. It is tamper-proof, shock-proof, and all of those elements are taken into consideration in how the individual is monitored, and we monitor them out of our area.
Okay, well, thank you for that additional information. Through the chair, quickly, who monitors offenders once they're released on this program?
Probation? Yeah, it's our probation through corrections.
Well, that's certainly exciting development. I was happy to see this in the budget, and at least something the province can do to address these violent repeat offenders. Again, we certainly are not seeing action from the federal government on this one, so thank you, Minister.
All right, I apologize for the interruption, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I'd like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet Tuesday, March 18th, at 9 a.m. to consider the main estimates of the Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services. Thank you, everyone. The meeting's adjourned.